Hey everyone, and welcome back to our DC Films podcast. This is episode 21, where this episode I wanted to kind of take the time for each of us to go over how or why the DCEU has made us so happy and what the DCEU truly means to us on a personal level. And because I know there's a lot of people out there post-Justice League who they honestly feel betrayed by Warner Brothers and what they did with these movies, because so many people have resonated with these films so much on a personal level that it's helped them beat their depression and help them on so many different aspects of their life. And for Justice League to kind of just abandon that and just treat the fans like shit, to be honest, it's something that really sucks. So I want to dedicate this episode to those people. And joining me this week are some obviously very familiar faces. So just a few of us today, so don't expect the whole podcast crew, but join me are just some awesome people nonetheless. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves to the listeners.
I'm Danielle, and I'm a Social Justice League on Tumblr.
I'm Katie, and I'm Story Advocate on Tumblr.
And thank you guys for doing this. Unfortunately, not everyone's here today. We might hear from Fatima a little later on as we keep the conversation going, but as of right now, it's just the three of us. So like I just said, we're just going to be talking about what the DCEU has meant to us. So whoever wants to start first, again, just what your first exposure was to the DCEU, and at what point did you feel that these films were more than just films for you guys?
I mean, my connection was really immediate. My connection was I saw Man of Steel in a really weird place in my life, because I lost my mom from cancer about a little less than a year before Man of Steel, and was still really heavy in the grief process when it came out, and just sort of went into it sort of not expecting anything to sort of rock my world. I was like, well, this is what we do. I mean, me and my girlfriend have been professional fans for 10 years, 20 years. So I just went to this movie and didn't expect a whole lot. I was really excited to see a good Superman movie. The previews looked gorgeous. And then Jonathan Kent died. And I had a really, really, really visceral reaction to it. Mostly because of the process of that scene and how Henry's portrayal of Clark's grief sort of plays out. And then I think that the whole DCEU has really sort of been about grief for me, and been about processing that and really what that looks like in a realistic fashion and how it feels. And I think that there's a lot of significance to the fact that Zach also lost his mom, and that you can definitely see the marks of someone who has really grieved someone who might be close to the center of their world. On these films, you can see that sort of mark, and that mark was really important to me because it felt like at the time nobody really understood the enormity of this to me. Nobody really understood how life-altering it was, and how after you go through something like that, you're a completely different person on the other side. And everybody was just sort of well, it's been 2 years, are you done yet? And it was literally never. Literally, you're never done. You go through it for the rest of your life. And having a sort of a Superman who could sort of exist in that, who could have that sort of perpetual grief and cycle back on that grief and be able to be yes, this grief is a huge part of who I am. Jonathan's legacy sort of just defines who he ends up becoming, was really, really empowering for me, because it showed that that wasn't catastrophic. It could be turned into something beautiful. And what it gets turned into, toward the end of Batman vs. Superman, is really something that's super inspirational. It's this idea of sort of what your activism can look like, and what you can do in terms of making the world a better place. Because my mother was definitely someone who made the world a better place. My mom was, we held a memorial service for her, and it was just decades of people showed up. from her life because she was the kind of person who touched people. And there was a lot of pressure right afterward to sort of be the kind of person who touched people, be the kind of person that she would have, like to fill that hole that she left behind her. And that was crushing for me because I felt really powerless. And I think the DCEU makes you feel, when you're that kind of person, when you're very insular, when you have that sort of like, need to process things that way, it's very empowering. It makes you feel like you can do that kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, like that there's a way through. And I think Batman versus Superman is amazing because it gives me a path. It shows me sort of like what the steps are. You can go through the process of helping people like Lois. You can go through the process of helping people like Clark. You can go through the process of helping people like Superman. And the contributions that you make matter, no matter how small or big they are. And that sense of sort of like, everybody's contributions being equal and everybody's contributions being important was really, really important to me at the time, because it's hard to feel like you matter, like you mean anything when you're trying to make a difference. Like if you're just doing what you do every single day, it's really hard to feel like you've broken any ground and you've made a difference in the world. And the cool thing about Superman altogether is that he validates that. He validates that idea that like no matter what you're doing, it's the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, like I.
Yeah.
Like,
I knew, this is why I asked beforehand, because I was like, do I want to bust out like the whole? That's my whole thing.
No,
yeah,
no, you're honestly, like, I've never felt closer to you than I do right now, because I don't know if I've mentioned this to you at all, Danielle, or if you've seen this at all, but I lost my mom, I would say it was April of 2011. So it wasn't like super close to Man of Steel, but it was fairly recent at the time, and I was still somewhat in the grieving process. It had been just over 2 years, but it was still a really rough time the first couple of years after my mom had passed away, because she was the one person in my life at the time who like accepted me as the superhero nerd that I was, because I was obsessed with Smallville and everything Superman at the time. Like my mom like helped me get my cosplay for Comic-Con one year, because she's like, hey, I got this black trench coat from our neighbor and I knew you wanted to dress up for Comic-Con as the guy from Smallville, so here's the trench coat. Because in Smallville, like before he's a Superman, he wears this like black trench coat with the black shirt with the silver S on it, and that's what I ended up wearing that year. My mom helped me get that, and
that's
like
awesome.
My mom got me like so much Superman stuff over the years. My mom was like super supportive in that. So for me, I just experiencing all of that, without her sucked, and that entire seeing Jonathan Kent die for me was really, really emotional. And that's when like whenever I watch these movies with like my fiance or whatever, and anything emotional happens, like I break down, and my fiance's just like, "Are you gonna keep crying every time we see these movies?" And I'm just like, "Yes, It's like even like when like before Justice League came out, and like that first trailer, or the last trailer came out, and they show like Clark out in the field, and we see him alive, and I'm like tearing up, and she literally asked me like, "Are you gonna cry?" And like I'm just like, and it was because me and her and my little brother were doing like a live reaction to it, and I'm just like, no. And it was awesome. like and even like in Justice League, like even though I wish this whole moment was handled better, even when Clark has that small moment of reuniting with Martha, like to me that was again, even though again I wish the moment was handled a little better, I would want that, and that I responded to that moment, and that's why I responded to these characters so much, because they feel real. Like it feels like these characters are handled with such care, and by people who care about these people. Like they aren't treating them like caricatures or these like, oh, there's these larger than life heroes that you can't relate to because they're godlike. No, it's like when you break these characters down, they feel like real people, like people you would know, people who are in your life. That's what absolutely. It's like when I look at Man of Steel, I don't see this godlike being who's making quips. Like who I see in Justice League is not the Superman that I saw in Man of Steel. In Man of Steel, I saw so much of myself in Clark and his journey. And it's hard to say that about just a guy who has superpowers and all this stuff, but it's what Zack was able to do really resonated with me on such a personal level. And because when he's struggling with all these things, though, basically the world's telling him like that they hate him, and he's still doing his best to do the right thing. Like for me, like that's how I felt for a long time. Like I feel like after my mom passed away, that I couldn't really deal with my grief. Like my mom, everyone, a lot of people in my life were kind of just telling me, to accept it and move on. And that's one of the hardest things to do, especially for people who, like my mom was a part of so many people's lives, and for my own family, just to be like, I could tell the fact that I was still like hung up on it bothered them. They're like, "Oh, you haven't like gotten over it yet." Like, not that I ever said that, but I could tell that that's what they were saying without saying.
Yeah, it becomes inconvenient for them, is I think a lot of what it feels like. It starts to feel very like your grief gets in the way of things. And, it's shitty. That's definitely resonant with my experience.
And especially because, very similarly to your story, Danielle, like, when we had my mom's memorial service, like, there were so many people, the same thing that she impacted in her life, that I had never met before, and immediately, so many of them came up to me and told them how much my mom meant to them, how close they were growing up, in high school, elementary school, whatever, and for, like, a good year after my mom passed away, so many people were, like, adding me on Facebook or whatever, and saying how telling me all the good stories they had of my mom, and it's just, I know it's not having a ton to do with the DCEU necessarily, but just knowing that she made an impact on people's lives, to me that it makes the pain like easier to deal with. That she meant so much to so many people, not just her immediate family. And watching these movies, I feel like watching Clark continuously try to do the right thing amongst a world that is super xenophobic, and just like, even though he saved the world, he still has to prove himself, and everything he's doing with, like, even after the bombing and Batman v Superman, and they're like, oh well, even though he was there, he probably had something to do with it. Like, seeing him struggle like that, and it relates so much to my own struggles in my own life. It's just Zack Snyder, and obviously knowing that Zack lost his mother too, and that's like, losing anyone's a terrible feeling, but knowing that I can relate to these movies and even Zack in that way makes the experience all the more relatable, and just it's hard to put into words because I'm getting really emotional. It's just, these movies are always gonna resonate with me, and even if they change moving forward, if they become more like Marvel, like whatever, nothing's gonna change how the previous movies have impacted my life in a positive way. Yep. Because
absolutely,
and now I've become a part of a group of people, including you two, and so many people on Tumblr and everything, and Twitter, that a lot of us feel the same way about these characters, and that, like, I can talk about how much I love these characters, how much they've impacted me without feeling judged, because I know that, like my fiance knows how much I love these characters and stuff, but she can tell, like, the amount of times I cry in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Justice League. She's like, okay, babe, like, calm down with the tears. I'm like, I just can't stop crying. But it's just...
Well, I literally couldn't talk to my friends about this for a really long time, because, like, the intensity of what they were to me, like what these films were to me, always came through in that language, and it always felt like as soon as I started getting emotional about it, as soon as I started being like, this connection is something that matters, my opinions were starting to be taken like less objective, and they were sort of like, there's like that level where you can be a literary critic, and then there's that level at which you're a fan, and people don't like to conflate those two things. People like to think, well, you're either a fan or you're a literary critic. So my ability to literary critique these things was really hampered, because I was like, no, like, a lot of this has to do with my subjective experience. A lot of this has to do with my personal connection. And I cannot leave that out of my analysis. That's not something that's irrelevant to my analysis, because my analysis is very much wrapped up in the fact that these films, helped me process something huge in my life. And basically, I don't know who I would be without that interruption, without that coming in and being at that moment and saying, like, here's the thing, like, it's okay to feel these feelings. It's okay to sit in the darkness. I've always been that person in my family. I've always been the person in my family who, like, sits in the dark and cries to sad music. And like that's like a entertaining activity. I've always been like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
like I've been like the emo child in my family for as long as I can remember. I mean, like I got heavy into Sarah McLachlan, and everybody was like, "This is really upsetting, you guys." Like, Danny, there's something wrong with Danielle, and I'm like, "No, I just really like sadness. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's a thing." And being able to sort of like sit with these films and have that be a space where it's okay to feel those things, and it's okay to feel like sometimes things aren't okay, was really, really empowering. And I hope that it's really, really empowering for a lot of other people, because I think that we have sort of a forced positivity culture, and we have sort of an idea that being unhappy makes you bad. And that is really damaging. And I think it's the reason that we have this tug of war over this particular Superman, because, they're really threatened by his lack of smiles. Because, like, he does smile in these films, but not when it's unnecessary. Only when those smiles are earned. And the idea that you have to earn happiness for a character, the idea that someone shouldn't be smiling unless that's what they're feeling on the inside, is still a very contested idea.
Yeah, and you're right. There is a forced positivity thing in our society, but it's all superficial. They don't really care if you're unhappy underneath. As long as you project positivity and happiness on the outside, they don't really care. And that's why what they're looking for is a Superman who is just like that. He could smile and make his little quips and beat up the bad guy and be totally good with it and everything. And it doesn't matter what he's feeling underneath, because all they want is that superficial exterior that makes them feel good. And that's a problem in our entire society. Yeah, and that's where, like, mental health stigmas come from, and all sorts of other issues that are creating a lot of anxieties and depressions in our society. We do this to ourselves or to each other because of this weird expectation we have that nobody's allowed to truly be unhappy, and if they are, well, keep it to yourself, man. Don't lay it on everybody else. Nobody else has time for it either, and it's very damaging. It's not healthy at all.
And I think that connects back to that experience with grief, and that everyone is just sort of like, well, you've had your public grief time, because there's that bubble. There's that bubble of about I would say like 6 to 9 months after it happens, in which you can get away with anything. You can act like like, this is my experience. Is like, you can act like a total fucking asshole for about 6 to 9 months. And people people will let you fall apart. People will let you, walk around like a zombie. People will let you not brush your hair. People will let you do a lot of stuff that they will not let you get away with otherwise. But once that period is up, it's over. Yep. And you need to you need to do that privately. You need to keep that under wraps. Basically, you should not be feeling this anymore. This is something like you've gone too long with it. And the idea
now it's
that
unhealthy.
People just wrap that
now
up
it's
in
too
9
much.
months is crazy.
Oh my gosh, that's like Victorian mourning, man. That is Victorian mourning all over the place. So they had like their specific time that they had to be in mourning, and you had to start off with black and veil your face to show your true grief, and then slowly, but and stay in public and not come out very much, and then slowly but surely graduate to no veil, and then lighter colors like gray and violet, and like that dark muted purple, and stuff like that, to show that you're still kind of grieving but not a whole lot, and only after the certain amount of time has passed then you can go back to regular bright colors and lovely, and all they're doing is externalizing that, but it's all on a time frame. It's all completely, you're right, on that time frame, and after that, well, it's time to be done now, off you go, and that's the end of that now. Do they actually think that people flip on a switch like that? It's kind of amazing to me. Do we actually look at each other and go, yeah, just flip that switch and be happy now? What?
I mean, if
What's
you
your
start
problem?
to study psychology, like, it's really just the science of standardizing emotions, of just saying, like, well, then you do, like, the stages of grief were something that I was obsessed with after this happened. I just got really, really obsessed with this idea of the Kubler-Ross model and sort of, like, how you process that as an actual real-life human being and not a fucking robot.
Yeah. Well, and not a textbook version, not just reading about it. It's not as simple as just going from this stage to that stage and then you're done. You can go from one to the next and back up a bit. You can go, from one to the next and then regress a step. It's not a continual
and, like, I'm an
process.
Aries. I spent 80% of that time in anger. Like, I spent a lot of that time in anger. So, like, for me, it was like, well, you're just stuck somewhere. And it's like, no, I think I already did, like, a bunch of these steps. It's just that, like, anger seems to be my favorite.
Yeah. And people could stay for years in one stage, I mean, there are people who never left a certain stage.
And that idea is so liberating. I wish that was more mainstream to our conversation about grief, is that idea that sort of, like, this could be the rest of your life processing this if it needs to be, because we get this idea that emotions are just sort of things that you have to check off a list.
Yeah, and it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all. And so, yep.
We've gotten far off the DCEU, though.
A little bit, but you know what? I care about you guys' mental health, and I completely agree with everything that you're saying. I'm over here nodding, So.
No, but that's why
I didn't come into these films quite as, I don't know how to say it. I don't have as personal a connection as you guys do in terms of like losing a loved one, or I know many other people who have shared their really beautiful stories of how the films help them connect with a certain part of themselves, or find hope in the depression and all that kind of stuff. And I admit, I didn't come at this from any of those angles. So sometimes it's kind of a mystery to me how obsessed I really am, which is sad, because I am no stranger to becoming obsessed with fictional stories to the point that even my family's rolling their eyes, like, I've done this before. But long ago, I just kind of hit a weird point where all the media was the same, and it was all fairly superficial, and it was all fairly predictable, formulaic, and or boring. And so I either stopped watching a lot of stuff and stopped really paying attention to media, and or selected it extremely carefully, and then promptly became obsessed when it fulfilled my expectations. And so, like, this one, I did not expect. It just kind of swooped in out of nowhere and pounded me. And a lot of it is because, like, and I'm so sorry to bring it up, I'm not trying to bash them, it's just the example fits. Like, with Marvel, it just doesn't... I've always been a person who feels very deeply, which is weird because you try to tell people that and they're like, okay. And, I'm just an extremely emotional person. I know this. I've made my peace with this. This is who I am. And so most media doesn't get into the feelings enough for me. Or, conversely, they'll do it to a weird degree where I'm like, wow, even I think that's overblown and cheesy, which is hilarious. But it happens. And and so it's just not genuine enough for me, most of it. And so this one, I sat down, and it's a Superman movie, you guys. I hadn't seen Superman since I was a kid. I hadn't cared about him since I was a kid. You know what I mean? He was somebody I easily left behind and never thought about again. And it was so weird to sit down and suddenly see a person who is introverted like me, who feels things deeply like me, who has, doubts or cautions about how he should be functioning in the world and whether he's doing it well enough, and what exactly his past should be. Like, I'm a full-grown adult. Like, these are usually things that society wants to attribute to teenagers, just finding their way in the world. But no, we're all going through it, and we're all dealing with different parts of that at different stages of our life. And so to see him, he was just so... I kept coming out, and all I could do was be like, he's so old-fashioned. He's such a gentleman. What is up with this guy? It was just the way that they fully 360-degree created this beautiful character who was so the opposite of everything we ever get given. You know, like punches things to deal with his anger, and punches things to, get revenge and solve the problem and win the girl, and all of it was just so out of the ordinary that it was kind of mind-blowing. And I suddenly had the scales fall from my eyes and went, holy crap, like, we've been fed all this crap for so long that I just came to accept it as standard. It was just normal after a while. That's, this is what it is. Well, I know it's always that way. The girl is always lame. The girl's always just the romantic lead. The girl's, the guy is always the hero, the big manly hero. And this is just the way it is. This is just the way our media is. And so it was simply mind-blowing to sit down and see the entire opposite of that and be such a beautifully, fully rounded person and character, right along with Lois, who was also fully rounded and all the way developed. I was floored. And it just took me a long time to even wrap my brain around it. But once I did, I realized, like, Zach has come in, and it's such a subversive approach. He just takes all those expectations and tips them on their head and gives us something entirely different. And that's probably why half of the world hates it, because it's not what they want. But that is exactly what I needed. And that's what got me hooked in so fast and so hard and so immediately. And I have never really left it, because it's so refreshing and wonderful to be able to sit and watch a hero feel and deal with his feelings, and not be judged weakly, not be judged as a weakling, because he has I don't know. It's just such a thing of beauty. So I admit, I come at it differently, but it's still,
it's so resonant with my experience, because
I don't think I can fully put great words to it. So.
Well, I think that, like, I couldn't have imagined these movies, and I think that was what was most exciting to me, is that when I go to the theater, 9 times out of 10, it's something I've thought about before. As a creative writer, I've sat down and been like, oh yeah, this is familiar. I would definitely, I would definitely do this, or I would definitely not do this.
This is going to happen now. Okay, well, that was laid for the, this is going to happen
these
later.
Films, and I just couldn't imagine. It was beyond the realm of what I thought was possible in this genre, and that was what was so shocking. Like, that's what's so beautiful about Batman versus Superman, is just going into that experience knowing that I'm going to get something that I couldn't imagine. Because Man of Steel, we kind of designed it beforehand, and we kind of said, like, this is what we want, and then Zach just went down the list and was like, yeah, well, I'll give you that and that and that and that. Sure, you can have all this stuff. And we were like, what is happening? Jaw just
drops. Holy crap! Yeah. Like, this can't be real. Like, this
not only did he fill the list, but he did things that I would have never imagined. So I went into Batman versus Superman kind of, like, just so keyed up, because I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen. I just don't know. And that feeling is like, it's like being on a roller coaster for the first time ever. Like, it's very
exciting. It's very exciting when you're finally like, holy crap, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm so excited, because you're right. Too often you can just pick as it goes along. You go, okay, yeah, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then, it just, what's coming, and it's so exciting to actually get in there and go, holy crap, I have no idea, and it completely blows all your expectations out of the water. And so that's what I expected for Justice League. That's what I thought we were getting, because they told us it would still be Zach's vision. And I thought there might be a couple compromises here and there, but I didn't expect it to be so completely overhauled, because that's what I expected, which is why it was such a letdown for me, because I wanted to go in there with no idea what was going to happen and completely get my mind blown, and thank Zach for it, just like I had for the previous 2 films. And so, that's why it was such a betrayal for me.
I'm with you there. And that's why, like, it was so nice to just walk into Batman v Superman, because Batman v Superman, we had never gotten, that's the crazy thing too, we'd never gotten those 2 characters in the same movie in live action before, ever. So you walk in essentially blind. You can be like, oh, well, maybe they could take from this animated movie or this comic book series and do this and that or whatever. But it was so new and exciting. And even like the comic book storylines that it did kind of borrow from, it still did new things with them. Like the whole, like, it literally took like the cool parts of The Dark Knight Returns and left all the shitty stuff aside.
It was perfect.
Bless that. Bless. Oh.
Because I know like there were some people who were worried, and like I'm not like I don't revere The Dark Knight Returns as great of a Batman story as some other people, just because I don't like the way they use Superman as like a government like object essentially.
Yeah.
Miller hates him, so I don't think it's unreasonable to just be like, as a Superman fan, I hate The Dark Knight Returns. Like, that's reason. Like, if he's gonna, he hates us, we hate him. Whatever.
And also, Frank Miller just a fucking creep and weirdo, anyways.
There's also that, like, who cares if we talk shit about Frank Miller? He's giant turd.
I know. Like, did anyone really care about his Dark Knight Returns 3 or whatever he just did? No. Like.
Oh, what was it called?
The Master Race or something?
Oh,
trying to do another one.
With the also, that's a really, really crappy title. Like,
scary.
I know.
It's a
now
scary
I'm just
title.
like,
From a fucking racist?
Does he believe in, like, the whites? Now I'm, like, concerned about just where he is in his mindset of just racial issue. I don't. Less said about Frank Miller, the better.
He's concerning. Got it.
Just like him,
but he
like
took
Alan,
that mess.
Alan Moore,
my
too.
least favorite line in the whole fucking, like, I am so angry about this line that I built an entire lesson plan around it.
Which line?
Like, I needed to exercise it. It's past time you found out what it means to be a man. Or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. I have the exact line somewhere, but he says basically you need to learn what it means to be a man. And it's like so baseline misogynist and so ugly and such a fucking crazy goddamn thing. Like you could just, if you even replaced man with human being, it reduces the impact of that statement, but it's not what Miller meant. Mm-hmm. Miller meant that the essence of being a man is something ugly. And that's what's so gross about it, is it's like so disrespectful to women, but it's also so disrespectful to what it means to be a man. And what Batman feels like it means to be a man. And like, I think I have a blog post up still about how damaging Frank Miller's original comic is to Superman, but conversely, how damaging it is to Batman. And that idea that he connects masculinity and that sense of manhood directly with violence and pain and all of that is really, really, really upsetting. It's really, really, really bad. And that actually was in the first cut of Batman vs. Superman, that line, and it disappeared. And that was so magical to me. It was like someone understood, someone knew, someone heard that line, and they said that lands wrong, and cut it out.
I can easily see Zach going, "This doesn't fit." I don't.
Because ultimately, isn't that like what the whole like the men are brave line? Like that's what kind of where that came from then.
Yes, that's what he transformed it into, and it's a huge
so
improvement.
Much better, like, I think, because it doesn't.
I mean, it in the first place, it's respectful toward men.
Because he's invulnerable. Exactly. And then now that he's vulnerable, he will now learn what it's like to be afraid. See, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And it's not really bashing, men or women.
It's still an ugly thing to say, but it's not.
Oh, it totally is.
It's not a condemnation of who Bruce is at a basic level, and I think that line is a condemnation of who Bruce actually is. And that sucks.
Oh, yeah. So...
Like people talk all the time about Batman versus Superman being disrespectful to Batman, and I think it's the most respectful portrayal so far. Like there's clearly so much care given to the fact that we have Alfred sort of treasuring old Batman in his hands with us and being like, this is what we used to be. We used to be something beautiful, and this is what the House of Wayne is. The House of Wayne is something valuable that should be protected. And Bruce flying in the face of that is very Bruce, but there's an acknowledgement of what he's desecrating. There's an acknowledgement of what he's hurting, and what he's hurting too is like the people who really like the fans who love him. And I think that this movie should. I mean, like, as a Batman fan, I think the movie hurts. I think it's a really painful movie, and I think that's intentional.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. And that's the beauty of it. And watching him pound Superman is not enjoyable because he's really just a cruel bully. And Superman is in pain and not doing well, you know, and we're all like, stop, stop, stop. It's over the top and it's too much. And we all know it. He's over the line. And that's why I was so excited for Justice League, because I really I knew that Zack was going to bring him down to that place in Batman v Superman so that he could bring him up in Justice League and give us the Batman that we all know and love and are ready for, you know. And I don't feel like we got him. I feel like we got a cheesy, sassy, reincarnation of him who is just way too close to Tony Stark and is just so superficial that that's not who I wanted. That's not who I expected, you know. And it was like, gosh, you know, and Ben did the best he could with what he had, but like it just wasn't the same.
Well,
and
it's like you were saying that all of these characters in these first few movies were very fully realized, and then we turned them into characters of themselves in this film. And for some of the characters that kind of worked, because honestly, there's not much to satirize about Barry. Barry's pretty straightforward. Victor is pretty straightforward. I'm going to conflate Ray and Victor for the rest of my life because they're both so beautiful.
Oh, I did that straight up in a fix, so don't worry. You know, he just was so much like Victor. I just called him Ray Fisher, and somebody's like, "Dude, did you mean Victor Stone?" I'm like, yeah,
he's just melted together. Like it's just like it's completely encompathing. Yeah. But those characters are pretty straightforward. But every other character sort of got like it was sort of a satirical version of them, and that felt really that was a really different approach. Here's the thing: if they'd made this Justice League movie and it had been all Joss's film and it had been just like that, I would have made peace with it because I've seen hundreds and hundreds of episodes of Justice League Unlimited, and I think that's a very similar approach that the DCEU has been doing for a very long time.
I would have dealt with it better because I didn't expect anything more.
Yeah.
That's why this hurts so bad.
Exactly. I think
I will say, though, sorry to cut you off, but I gotta say, for the Flash, I'm worried, you guys. Like, this could just be me, but I swear part of me feels like he was done a disservice in the rewrites in that they made him so afraid of everything and such a goofy blabbermouth about brunch and this and that and the other and stuff like that. And I'm not saying he might not have had some of that already, but do you remember the very first time we were introduced to this character before they dropped the first trailer and they had like that little intro for everybody for a couple days? And one of his was a specific pose where he was standing on the fox or whatever and did that little prayer pose, and it looked like he was just kind of readying himself. That we never got. And so, like, what is that? Does that mean that Barry, being a speedster, is experiencing life in such an accelerated manner that it's actually hard for him to settle down, and that he's now learned how to calm down and pose, you know, and compose himself for a moment through that, to breathe and actually be in the moment, and it's okay? Or is that just how he's always been, and he's always been a little bit more zen in terms of, all right, this is how I start my mojo, and that's fine too, but we never got any of that. All we got was I'm scared of this, and I'm scared of that, and I'm scared of this, and I talk too much, and I'm a blabbermouth. And it was comic relief. And it was just
Barry's
like, I feel like we're missing pieces, and it really freaks me out. So I'm upset. Anyway.
I mean, I think like to make him marketable, people have started conflating Barry with Wally, and I think that's a huge mistake because I love Barry so dearly. And Wally West is kind of a pale imitation of him, in my opinion, and I've always felt that way. And I know that's a really unpopular opinion, and I love all you Wally West fans.
I watched some of the animated Justice League just out of sheer curiosity, and Wally was funny, but he was so very one-dimensional. It was almost.
Barry is an extremely deep and serious character, and I love that about him.
I'd be okay.
And I think that he was probably done an injustice. Because
that me. Just that one pose.
I mean, we see that in the scenes where, you know, we actually let him have some serious moments. Every scene he has with his father is exceptionally serious and exceptionally. It shows sort of like the strength, and you see sort of that soft bucking that he does against his dad. Just shows you some of the depth of Barry's character. His sort of like, you know, like, I mean, like he's got like a soft sort of like fuck you thing happening in that scene, and it's so gorgeous. Because it's so true to like a parent-son, like a parent, offspring relationship, where like, you just like you love someone so much that you're just kind of like, oh, eat shit,
well, and the thing, he's never gonna hard up rebel against his father because his dad is in jail wrongfully, and he knows it, and so he's always gonna be a bit softer with him, but it's still there. And I feel like there was more to that. I feel like there was more than we got. I feel like a lot of the reshoots, so many that we could pin as reshoots, are what make him the blabbermouth comic relief who's afraid of everything. And I really kind of want to know what he was supposed to be before they got in and started muddling around. Because it just feels to me like there's more, and there's something else there that we were robbed of. And I just... wondering is freaking me out more than knowing, I think, at this point, like,
yeah.
I mean, because it just small things like that are like, gosh dang it. And I'm not saying that he wasn't funny in the original one. He probably was. But knowing Zach and Chris Terrio, he was probably more of an understated version. Not someone who's going to turn around over his shoulder as the tunnel is about to flood and go, oh, and I'm also afraid of, water drowning, And it's just like... That's just such a throwaway glib thing in the middle of an extremely serious situation that I go, okay, that's Joss Whedon. It's so obvious. And it just, what did we miss? What don't we have? What missing piece was there, before they started messing up? Even his initial meeting with Bruce he was cute. He was totally adorable. He was, stop right there, I'm in. I need, and then, the first take we saw was him get that funny little look on his face, and he kind of sticks his tongue to the side and goes, friends. And you can totally see, I'm kind of alone here.
But it's also less, like, those scenes are less him being funny and more him actually being a very soft boy. Like, more him being, like, a very tender guy.
Exactly.
And that comes across very funny because he's an awkward kid, but... It doesn't
so much
necessarily,
potential,
it doesn't necessarily mean that he's like going to be like full-time comic relief for this group.
At
least not to the degree that they amped it up to.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that Ezra could do either one perfectly well. He did a great job. You know what I mean? He's a lovely actor. So I have no problems with the way he did it. I have problems with the people asking him to do it after he already created a character that we don't really know how similar or dissimilar it was. And then had to go and, it seems, create an even more amplified / new one, for the rewrites. That bothers me. That really does. As an actor, I'd be kind of pissed. I wouldn't be able to say anything. I probably wouldn't badmouth the production company because I need jobs and I don't want to get blacklisted. But I'd be pissed that I went through all of that craft and process to produce this character for one director, and then suddenly he's gone and they bring in somebody else and it's never mind. Scrap all that. It sucks. Let's do this. That would be like, what? That's not what I just spent 9 months doing. That would bother me. It really would. Yep. So it bothers me just missing out seeing that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So
and that's why anyway. I immediately in that scene with him meeting Bruce for the first time, like, as soon as that brunch line comes up, I'm like, whoa, what's this?
That's a rewrite. See, isn't that funny?
And
you
also,
can see the exact moment that it stops and becomes Joss Whedon, and I was like, whoa. It should not be that easy to tell. Also,
it looks awkward because you can tell it's green screen. It's not. It wasn't shot in the same set.
Yes.
Because Ezra's face,
exactly
where he's standing and like where his face is, like it's completely different than where it was. And then Bruce just looks awkward there. Like it looks like
Bruce.
Yeah.
He looks puffy, like just in that last shot. Suddenly his face is puffy.
Why though are we making Batman smile so much? He's Batman.
I know.
Alone.
They have issues with making all of them smile. It drives me crazy. So yeah, but I totally agree. Like you can see the moment; it was all there. And then suddenly, like green screen, Ben's face, and dialogue all went. This is Joss Whedon, and I went. You're right. This is Joss Whedon. Gosh dang it! Like why do we need to add this in? Why do we need to? It just.
I know.
All right. So,
Nick, were you gonna make a point about the Dark Knight? I derailed you.
I'm so sorry. I cut you off, but she mentioned the Flash, and I freaked out. This has been on my mind for a while. Anyway,
that adaptation, the act of adapting that comic is actually really one of my favorite things that I think Zach has done so far in his career. I can't believe the depthness with which he adapted that and just sort of sliced all the good stuff out of it.
That was impressive because I remember reading that as a kid, and I don't know why. My dad had a Batman comic book, and I was like, cool. And, you know, it was like one of those big, like, commemorative editions or something, and, you know, had several different stories in it, and that was one of them. So I read that and was like, that was weird, and then put it aside and never came near it again. It was not one of my favorites. And so to hear he was drawing from that, I was like, what? You know, like,
I know.
Are you sure that's a good idea? I didn't really enjoy that, but whatever. Comics guys are comics guys, you know. I'll just wait and see. And then we see it, and I'm like, holy crap. Look what a wonderful job he did. Look how he, like, used Superman's goodness and purity to rejuvenate an old and worn out and extremely cynical Batman. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. I can't believe.
Like, honestly,
but, you know, like, why wasn't the original like this? That's what it should have been. This is beautiful.
I know.
It was really amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, like looking at that story, and especially like earlier today, like I guess like the newest issue of Batman came out in the comics, and like someone tweeted some of the pages, and it was dialogue between Superman. It was like Clark explaining to Lois and Bruce explaining to Selina kind of who each other were. They were like, oh yeah, well Superman, like he's like a victim of genocide. He's like the last of his people and blah blah. And like Clark is explaining to Lois, like, you know, like Bruce, like he should have been a killer. Like he should have been these things because you witnessed a terrible, terrible crime. But and they're both saying about each other, they both became beacons of hope. And someone's like, oh, see, this is why Zack Snyder got Superman and Batman wrong. I'm like, whoa. First of all, Batman v Superman.
What?
And I'm just like, first of all, this Batman v Superman, they didn't know who each other were yet. That was the whole point. Like, it's like it was just a really stupid thing to see on Twitter earlier. So I just wanted to vent my frustrations about that.
Every single time anything, like that's the thing, is that for years now, we're gonna have like comics come out and everyone's gonna say, see Zack Snyder, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like you literally have no rhetorical ground to stand on here. You're just saying it. It's become like a catchphrase now. It doesn't mean anything. It's empty. Because like when you ask people what they mean in those situations, which I did for the first 4 years. Like I literally would just get on those posts and be like, well, explain your position. Why do you hate Superman so much in this particular iteration? Like, what's wrong? Because I really thought these people were like, you know, I really thought that I was going to get to the center of this, to like the center of what's wrong. And I feel like the center of what's wrong is just that they're really, really insecure about a number of things. But, you know, I would always ask them, and they would never be able, like half the time when you when you engage these people, you find out halfway through the conversation that they didn't see the films.
Yeah.
That's what you find out half the time. Half the time you have these conversations with these people, and they're like, well, I didn't see it, but I did read a synopsis, and I'm like, wow, you're fired. Goodbye.
You're no longer authorized.
Like, why are we having this conversation with someone who doesn't, like, you're completely unarmed in this situation. Exactly. We've both seen the comic panel, but you haven't seen what you're comparing it to, so, bye.
I know.
It gets really old, and it's just like that stupid one going around of Superman saving the suicidal teen. This is what Zack Superman should have been, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. Because people dying in factory fires don't mean anything. Like, you know, it's just, I don't know.
I understand
they really bother me
like,
in that, like, I'm not saying that saving a suicidal teenager is bad. It's most definitely not. Please, Superman, do all of that. But, you know, if he spent time doing that in a film, I think people would accuse it of being slow. And the fact that, like, that's not the point that Superman's trying to point out here, or that Zack's trying to point out. Every single time, well, not every time, but very often, he goes to the aid of the underprivileged, the ignored, and the basically, we're going to write you off crowd, you know? So the whole point of her being in that factory was the fact that she was in the factory and they weren't going to do anything about it. They legit said at the bottom, I can't believe they're going to let that girl die. You know, it was very obvious that she's just one person. She's just a teenager, or she's just a young girl, and she doesn't matter. So we are going to go ahead and save, I don't know, firefighter, police, I don't even know, you know, and not do anything. And that's when Superman goes, nope, I'm out. How is that not as affecting as him standing next to somebody who wants to hurt themselves and saying, I'm just going to stay here.
Also, in that scene, what he's sacrificing. He's actually sacrificing a professional lead that he's on, and he's literally investigating Batman actively. And this is the difference between Batman and Superman in Batman versus Superman that I think people don't talk about enough. Clark's still like doing his job. Bruce has quit. Bruce has refocused all of his energy into killing Superman, and Clark has literally just started picking up this situation and being like, okay, well, I need to investigate it and I need to do all this stuff, and getting very fixated on it. But when duty calls, he goes and Superman's again. When duty calls, when something is going to fundamentally derail, like he was going to basically bust Batman. He was going to get like all the dirt on Batman that evening. Mm-hmm. He was on the trail. He was hot on the trail. He was literally the only reason he was down in that kitchen was because he was trailing Bruce, and he just drops it on a pin because he hears that girl's gonna die. And that is the fundamental difference, and that's the reason that Clark has something to teach Bruce in this film, and that Bruce doesn't have anything to teach Clark necessarily.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too, like, and also if Clark hadn't been investigating Bruce, he wouldn't have known about that girl and she would have died. That's another thing to look at when you're looking at that scene too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Like, that's why it's just like, you could, when people criticize Zack Snyder's treatment on Batman in this movie, it's like, this isn't like your traditional Batman story, because this is a broken Batman. He's thinking he's at the end of his
and they made that very clear. I don't know. The only way clear they could have made it was to have Joss rewrite that and have Alfred straight up tell Bruce, you're over the line and you're not doing what you're supposed to, and, I'm very disappointed in you or whatever. But that's not the way they function, and that's one of the reasons why these films do mean so much to me, is because they stand up to literary analysis, and they stand up to I don't have a literary degree, Danielle, but, I always loved English, and I always loved English class, and I AP'd right out of it because I loved it so much. And it's like, when things stand up to continued scrutiny over and over again, and you can still find layers, you can still find new things, you can still find, that these choices all stack on each other and perfectly work, that is really, really well-constructed writing. And most of them, like most films and media, which is part of why I just kind of like divorced away from them for so long, was because they don't stand up to scrutiny. And basically it all comes down to, this is plot based and it needs to happen because plot, or we're just going to give you like the most superficial kind of point of it and expect you to be severely impressed. And that's just not how they've ever worked. That's part of the other reason why I love these movies so much. So Danielle, it totally meant something to me when you talked about talking about your personal experience with it and then your literary analysis of it. It was like, yes, thank you, because you're right. You can't divest the two, and they're both there, and they both have equal weight. It's really, I don't know. People just go, wow, you're really weird. And it was like, but it,
as someone who habitually deconstructs things, like just out of habit, if you're just constantly deconstructing things, 90% of media is so disappointing because it immediately falls apart. It's like submerging bread in water. It just falls apart in your hands, and that can be so disappointing. And to have, I think I kind of just adjusted to that feeling. Like, I just kind of said, oh, well, this is the price I pay for being a genre fan. This is the price I pay for being a sci-fi fan. Like, this is the price.
I just get angry after a while, which is why The Flash, like, I still watch it, but I do with a sneer on my face, I kind of watch it go, because it's just so clear that whatever potential they have, they're not going to utilize it to its fullest. And so I'm like, I've stopped expecting it, because it's just too hard to expect it and get let down over and over and over again. This will be my eventual quote enjoyment of any DCEU film from this point, if this is what they decide to stick with, because it's not fulfilling to me. It doesn't get me excited like these previous installments have. And again, this is why Justice League is such a horrific letdown, is because that's what I expected to find when I got there. And it wasn't. It was not. It barely held together out of water. And then, you know, he put a little bit in and it was gone. And I was like, holy crap, this is not anything, you know, that I was deeply, deeply enjoying. Now this is just like all the other 90% of crap out there that just doesn't work for me. It doesn't fulfill me. It does not get me inspired or excited at all. And so it just, yeah, it was a very deep betrayal that I'm still processing, as you can tell.
Yeah. And that's why, we were doing this podcast in the first place. We'll list the subject anyway, because for those of you who are out there who were so disappointed by Justice League, and because of how the other films have impacted you, your opinion is validated. Like your feelings for these movies are validated. Just because Warner Brothers decided to treat us all like crap and forget that we were the ones who supported these movies from the very beginning, like that doesn't mean like you're not allowed to still have those feelings about the previous movies anymore. Like I understand the betrayal. Like I completely get it. Like I'm right there with you. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, and I know it's hard when, especially if this is something that like helped you know, like I said earlier, like beat your depression or help you come to like help this movie accept you for who you were or who you are. Like those are awesome things that like that movies were able to do. And just because, you know, a movie Justice League comes out and doesn't continue that, doesn't mean that the other movies didn't. And we all have these experiences with these movies, and yes, we're all for the most part really, really disappointed in what Justice League became because of the studio and Joss and everything. But what Man of Steel did, what Batman v Superman did, and even to an extent what Wonder Woman did for some of us, like these movies, their impact are going to be long lasting. And even though Justice League was a big disappointment, in my eyes, you know, like these movies, the previous movies still have succeeded in helping me accept me for who I am and help me find this group of people who feel the same way and also accept me for who I am, and create an environment that we can all be ourselves and just like love these movies and rant about Justice League and how much we hate it. Like these movies did that. Like we're allowed to have these feelings. You're allowed to feel however you want to feel about these movies. You know, it's you matter. Like your opinion still matters.
Yep, and your feelings about these films matter. And these films don't stop being amazing and meaningful and a personal connection for many just because the studio tripped along the line and lost some faith. You know, they are going to do what they're going to do, but that doesn't take away what Man of Steel or Batman v Superman and you're right, Wonder Woman and anybody else, you know, like Two Quick Deaths loves Suicide Squad, okay, but that doesn't take away what these mean to you, and don't let this disappointment ruin the previous connection and enjoyment that you've had. You know, we have stood up to the haters all these years, and part of it was backing the studio and defending them. Now I'm like, dude, I was rooting for you and you failed me. You're on my crap list forever. But the films will stay, you know, I will stay defending them. I will stay connected to them. I will stay supporting anybody out there who also enjoys them and wants to talk about them because they are worth something. I don't care what the world says. They are worth something. And so is your opinion, and so are you. You know, and so
if we never get validated for this, if we never actually, I think we will. I think that.
I think we will over time.
It's going to take a very long time. I think that maybe like 10 years minimum down the road, we're going to reevaluate.
Sucks. I'm so impatient. I don't want to wait.
It's going to be hard. But I think that regardless of whether or not we get that validation, like we understand what the truth is, and the truth is irrefutable. Like we have enough people in our corner to validate those experiences and to say like this, the fact that this means something to you is important, and these films do have a lot of content, and like every single time that we say, oh well, like I noticed this in the film, and then you know we have like Zach validate that on Vero or something, everybody kind of has a party, and it's like I think that's awesome and that's beautiful, but I also think that we don't necessarily need Zach to validate that, because I do believe in sort of a death of the author. Like, I think it's really cool that all of that was intentional. I think that's awesome. But I also think that whatever your interpretations of these films are, they're right. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember going forward, is that you don't have to let anybody tell you that these films aren't what you think they are, because they are a different thing for everybody in the fandom, and all of those people are right. And that's the coolest thing about a really strong narrative, is that it can be translated through a bunch of different lenses. It can be a different thing to everybody. I think that, you know, like, I've heard a great deal since Justice League happened, from queer kids in the community, and how important this stuff was, and how, you know, that was a completely unturned stone, and something we don't talk about necessarily is like the queerness of Snyder's Superman, and how that sort of has validated a lot of people who were looking for that validation, and that's just as valid as any other interpretation. All of those interpretations are correct, and having a bunch of people come along and tell you that that's wrong is just a reflection of how ignorant people are to the way that narratives actually work. Because you can't be wrong. I mean, like, you know, you can you know, very, very widely misinterpret a text, but if you can support your opinion on that, if you can literally say, this is the part where I decided that, you know, this is the part where I think that this is happening, you know, if you can pull an actual, you know, frame or moment out of that film and say, here's the part that I relate to for this reason, like, you still get to be right. You just, I mean, like, that idea is just sort of like one that's on the way out, because I think we have this idea that we need to have like a general consensus about these films.
Definitive opinion about it, you know, yeah. Which is where
and that's
you get
some bullshit.
Everybody feels this way. Everybody thinks that, you know. It's total BS. It's total BS.
Why are we talking about film at all then? Yeah. If we're all just looking for the same opinion.
Exactly. And we're not. That's the problem, is that everybody's looking to make everybody else agree with their one opinion. And, you know, I'm sorry, the world doesn't work like that, and people don't work like that. And so we are allowed to have our opinions. Joe Blow, idiot down the street, who's busy bashing these films, is also allowed to have his opinions. That doesn't mean I need to listen to them. And that definitely doesn't mean that... Yeah, exactly.
Not judge him based on them. Because I will tell you right now that a lot of the folks... who have embraced this Justice League Superman, whether I like it or not, I have definitely had a knee-jerk reaction where I've kind of reevaluated them, where I've kind of been like,
okay, make you go, oh, okay, wait a minute.
What do you think Superman is? You know? No, I really like if you're looking at that reflection on the screen, and that's your Superman, then that says something about you to me. And I do kind of low-key judge people on that stuff. I do kind of say, like, okay, well, what does that say about you? Like, what does that mean that this means to you, and why is it important? Because it's important to me for totally different reasons then.
And that, again, is part of the feeling of betrayal that has been so prevalent among the fans. Like, and I admit my feelings of betrayal aren't even as deep as some of the ones I've read that just broke my heart, you know, that talk about how much these films meant to them because they identified with it, and it made them feel like maybe they were okay too. And, you know, I can't remember who was on Tumblr that talked about that, and he felt like with Justice League, it just felt like he had the door slammed in his face and was told, these are not for you. And that is absolutely, I know that's not what the studio intended. I know they're not going, cool, we're going to go stick it to a whole bunch of fans. You know, I know they're not thinking that, but in their crazed grab for critical acclaim and the almighty dollar, they forgot all about the people who have been there since day one supporting their work and defending it, and who really needed it. And so it's just a lesson to me, never, ever to let your aspirations and your desire for that stupid almighty dollar to get in the way of real people. Because in the end, that is what matters most to me, are the people. And it's I don't care if I'm rich, if I have to screw over a bunch of people who really needed that connecting point in their lives to get it. I don't. I'd rather be poor.
I think a lot of the mistake that we made in the first place as a fandom was to put our faith in Warner Brothers.
I know, I should have known better.
Warner Brothers was to say, like, this corporation.
I was so proud of them, and now
it's always a fallacy to say, like, this corporation is my friend. You see this right now with the Disney Fox merger. Is a bunch of people being like, well, Disney would never do that to us. Like, no, Disney would set us on fire. You don't understand. For 50 cents. It doesn't even have to be a round dollar.
I know that they need money and stuff, and I know that they've kind of been guilty of tinkering a little bit here. That I never really expected them to go this far. I really didn't, to do this kind of a craziness at the last minute, to completely redo the tone and everything like that. And you're right, it's not like it hasn't happened before, so I don't know why I'm surprised. What I will say is that something about me that my husband bemoans regularly.
This is how I know I've become a fandom old.
Yeah, I tend to trust and believe in people and things until proven wrong, and so that was my bad for believing in them and actually trusting that they would do the right thing just because they said they would, because that's typically what I do. Now that they've betrayed me and a whole bunch of other people, it's like I just don't ever see that they'll win that trust back again. I don't like, they might be able to, but they'd have to work really hard, and I don't think they care enough about me or any of the other people that they have to back to really work that hard. And so I don't think they'll ever earn it back. That is one thing. Once it's gone, it's pretty much gone. They've showed their cards, they've shown their faces, and now it's like, okay, I see how this is. My bad. I'm sorry. I thought you were better than that. So.
And that's one of the most frustrating things, too, is that, looking at the situation, like, after everything that Zach has been through, they still thought it was a good idea to be like, we know this isn't Zach's movie, and still put his name all over it, so even if it gets bad reviews, it's still on Zach and not Joss Whedon. Because
that did frustrate me. So much of the reshoots, there was so much, like, I haven't had a chance to do a percentage. That might be the only reason I purchased this movie, so I could sit down and do a percentage of how much I think is Zach and how much I think is Joss, but I think it's real close. And if it's that close, Zach's name should be on the movie. It's very obvious this is not his film. He did some cinematography, he did some camera work for it, but so much of this is not his film that it is a travesty to have his name put on it. And I agree. I think they were covering their butts, as always.
Given the circumstances, I think that's what escalates this from like regular banal sort of everyday corporate evil to like real like mustache twirling arc villain evil.
True evil.
This idea that like something terrible happened to Zach, and they were sort of like, this looks like an opening. Yes,
and that is never, ever okay. That is just lacking in decency and integrity and empathy. And no. And you're right, that's what makes them the true villains in this situation. That's what makes them look so much worse than if they had just, done what they usually do. So, it's just...
honestly, I feel like
it just reeks of disrespect, it just reeks of again, this is why I guess I don't know why I'm shocked that they turned their back on so many people who actually connected with this film. But again, it reeks of, we just don't care about the people. All we want is the money. And it is poetic justice that it's not coming up to their expectations, and for the first time ever, I don't feel bad about it. Like, I was always, Batman v Superman, I was like, what? Come on, that's a great movie. Come on, people go to the movie. Go to the movie. This movie's good. I should go to this movie again. I love this movie. And this one, I can't do that. And I do feel in a pessimist way. I don't want to see this universe die, but at the same time, I'm like, you freaking brought this on yourselves. This is the consequence that falls on you for your actions. And, I'm certainly not going to feel bad about them. You did this. You did it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why, like, I'm not surprised either. And look, from day one, Warner Brothers has never come out and said, we are sorry that Zach has had to deal with so much of this media flack.
It's true. They never defended him, and I kind of wondered, but, I figured they were just doing their thing and ignoring it, and I should have known better, so.
Like, and honestly, like, in what other instance, maybe other than, like, Michael Bay, for frankly, he deserves it, like, has the director received so much shit for making movies that people don't like?
Yeah.
When?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like he's, like, a sexist or a racist or a homophobe or any of these other really terrible things. And it's, like, he's just making movies that worship people don't like. So what? that does not give anyone the right to say any of the shitty things that have been said about Zack. And in fact, the studio has never come out and defended him. And this whole stunt with Justice League, that's like, that first, like, oh, you know, we're going to keep Zack's vision, you know, Joss is getting there for a few pickup scenes, is like just like...
Liars! Oh my gosh, they just straight up lied to us. I mean, that's part of why I believe them, is because they said stuff like that, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, guys, you know? What was I thinking? I mean, oh my gosh, they just lied to everyone. They lied to our faces. I just... The depth of this is just, it's crazy, you know? It is the kind of thing that you're just like, really? I didn't actually think that happened in real life, you know, because surely they would realize that doing that would get them a bad reaction. Oh no, okay, I guess they really are that dumb. So I don't know. The thing about Zack is, I think that he hits people in an almost subconscious place where he threatens their idea of what masculinity is, of what superheroes should be, you know, of the status quo and the way stories should be told, i.e. the chick's always the love interest in the background, and, you know, the hero is always the big masculine dude, and all that kind of thing. And he hits them in an almost subconsciously sacred area that they didn't know was there. And so, like, it's just been bred into us in our society all while we're growing up. It's always there, and it's usually in the background and not so much in our faces, and so we don't even realize that we're internalizing that kind of thing. And then when he comes up and challenges that, their reaction is so immediate and so passionate and so visceral that, you're right, they just go straight for the throat. And it's like, really interesting. You need to be looking at yourself. If you know, if it's garnering this kind of reaction, I don't want to be reacting like that and not looking at myself and going, why do I feel so strongly about this? Why is this such an issue for me? Why am I going back crap crazy over directors just making movies? You know, what does this say about me? I need to look at myself. And I know not everybody does that, but for me, why I would not want to be having that kind of reaction without knowing why I'm having that kind of reaction.
Well,
you know?
What I think is really interesting about it is that it's actually a really common pathological reaction to having those kind of systems exposed. Like when you expose the patriarchy, when you expose white supremacy to people
freak right out, you know, yeah.
Their first reaction is actually to blame the person who exposed it for the problem. Is to say, like, Zack Snyder is the source of misogyny because he told me that the patriarchy exists.
Oh my God.
And this is actually something that happens all the time. Like, I get this in my reviews all the time, where I'll be like, you know, like, well, like, people will just be like, sort of like, well, like, you know, the teacher really hates, you know, men and women, and it's just, like, really super sexist, because I talk about sexism in my classes, because I say, this is a problem, here's what the problem looks like, you know, take a close look at it. And as soon as you do that, a lot of people have these knee-jerk reactions where they're like, oh, well, this didn't exist before you pointed it out, so you must be the one who made it.
Oh my gosh.
And it's really bad. It's really poor logic. It's not.
Well, isn't that like?
But it's also really protective, because we have a lot invested in the patriarchy. We have a lot of a lot of our basic ideas and values and ideals are very much invested in those systems. And when you take those systems and you say, oh, well, they're fake, everyone's like, oh shit, now I have nothing. I have no structure. Yeah. What am I built upon if not you know, the fact that white people are the pinnacle of human achievement and shit. If you can't believe in that anymore because you realize that it was something that's constructed, then, you know, then a part of your personality falls apart, and you have to be able to rebuild that, or you can say, I reject this because it's something you made up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like I was just reading the other day, like, because of the whole like Kevin Spacey situation, like. People were angry at the person who...
People are blaming the kid that, like, you know, talked about his experience with a sexual assault with him, right?
And they're saying, like, oh, he's the reason that House of Cards is getting fucked over. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
You know what? Even if that was true, good, fine, go ahead. I'm sorry, but a TV show is not more important than a person. And no, we shouldn't just turn our back and ignore it as we have for centuries and years and decades, and just be like, well, whatever, it's a good show. Like, I agree. I'm like, I heard it was on the chopping block before this kid even said anything, though, right? He's not a kid anymore, but like, wasn't it on the chopping block before he even brought this up?
Yeah. And that's how a lot of situations have been.
It was going to be its last season, or it wasn't doing insanely well, or
that narrative is completely constructed. This idea
I was going to say it was already kind of there, and then this came out, and they were like, "Oh yeah, forget it," and then they just hacked the whole thing and just hacked him out of the last season and went, "We'll just go ahead with Robin Wright," which is better. I was like, cool.
If anything, now I'm more inclined to watch, because I've never really. Not that the show ever looked like boring, or I just it's not my cup of tea. But if anything, now I'm like an all Robin Wright show. Now I'm in. Like, I love Robin Wright. She's never done anything shitty. Like,
show with an Amazon in the lead. I'd go watch that. That's awesome. That is really awesome. I've seen Tumblr posts roam around talking about how she should be the lead. And it would be an awesome show and this and that and the other, and I just don't think they expected to get their wish so quickly, so they gotta be just over the moon.
Yeah, I can't believe they followed through on that. That was nuts. Like, everybody was like, well, just make Robin Wright the lead. Like, this is the obvious answer. And, we say the obvious answer all the time as, viewers. And we're always like, oh, well, the obvious answer would be to, actually include women and people of color. And then, studios are like, what? What's that? I don't understand. This is the first time that they've just been sort of like, oh, okay.
Wow. And that's why, looking at, a perfect example of that, too, is, the bathtub scene in Batman v Superman. So many people were saying, oh, Zack Snyder's so sexist because he showed Amy Adams naked in a bathtub. I'm like, but did you see any of her body below the top portion of her chest?
Also, Amy Adams has a body, and that body being present on screen does not necessarily is not necessarily misogynist in itself. The idea that a female body, the presence of a female body, has to be something misogynist is definitely something that you bring to that interpretation on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the problem, that people immediately associate skin with misogyny, and that's why we had the trouble with the Amazons bearing their midriffs, why we have trouble with Amy in the bathtub, why we have all this trouble, because the minute skin is showing, we assume it's got to be misogynist, because most of the time, it probably is. I'll admit that. 85% of the time, it's probably because, totally. There are times I'm like, why does her dress need to be that low cut? I don't know why.
You should scrutinize
the
bathtub scene. It's just that once you do scrutinize the bathtub scene,
exactly, you have to actually examine it. And this is the problem, is that people aren't examining it. They're just knee-jerk reactioning over it and then freaking out, which is why you get Amazons going, it's cute that you're outraged, but here's why you're wrong. That lady was hilarious, by the way, and I really appreciated her going, no, this is not my problem. And that's the funny thing, too, about that whole,
that whole controversy, too. Is that, I always see those, whenever I'm on Facebook, I'll see those, now this videos that, explore a topic, and it has, millions of views. They explored that, but never once did I see the comments made by the actual actors who play the Amazons. Not once. In the entire video. It's they're slamming Zack Snyder, oh, see, this is what happens when you have, a male director and a male costumes designer, and this is what happens, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, have you talked to any of the actresses? No, but this is what famous people said about it, so we're upset about it. This was...
That's the thing, though, is that, people just kind of think that they can, make observations, and that's the beginning and the end of it. They can be like, well, this happened, so it's bad, and, this is, and it's just really convenient to be like, well, male directors are like this and female directors are like this, and I'm like, how is that not sexist in the first place?
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't expect, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be suspicious of male directors. I think we should. I think we absolutely should.
I completely agree, too, yeah.
Patriarchal, pressure is much higher on people who, were raised as men and people who are men in the patriarchy. But the assumption that if you put a woman in that position, everything will be better is really, really harsh, because a lot of us ladies are dealing with a lot of our own internalized misogyny, and a lot of us are just as prone to those things. Like, I think that, like, you know, by averages, you can definitely increase the quality of those gender dialogues by including an equal number of women, but you still have to sit down with these movies, and you still have to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. And I'm sorry, you really do have to sit down with Wonder Woman and ask it hard questions, and ask Patty hard questions, and stop softballing these feminist questions and saying, like, you know, like, what do you really think about the state of Wonder Woman's femininity? What do you really think about homosexuality on Themyscira? What do you really think about the fact that there's no women of color past a certain point in your film? Like, can we talk about those things and still say Patty Jenkins is an amazing director, Patty Jenkins is doing really great feminist work? You know, all of this stuff can be true at the same time. But if we're not, you know, scrutinizing it, we're just going out there and being like, well, Zack Snyder showed a naked lady and now it's over because fuck him, he's canceled. Like, it's so pointless. It doesn't do anything, because, like, then you look at that as a director and you say, okay, well, the feedback that I'm hearing is less naked ladies. A great way to solve that problem is not to include ladies. Oh shit, we've just fucked ourselves over.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate what you're saying about, we can't just assume that, you know, all of this, I say this all the time, my children roll their eyes at me, but it's true. Like, anytime we say all of this group of people is good or bad or whatever, we're wrong. There is no way an entire group of people that everybody is the same. There's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be differences. Humans in themselves tend to be sheep and collect together, but that doesn't mean we're all exact carbon copies of each other. And so you can say that all women would make better directors, but you would be wrong, because you're right. Plenty of us are dealing with our own issues and may or may not make a good product, you know, and may or may not make a product that works for what we want, you know. And you can say all men are bad, but at the same time they're not. And so, like, this is the problem. Anytime we want to call an entire group of people one thing, we are automatically wrong. You know, it is a fallacy to assume that any one group of people is all the same. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I say. And I say that, and my kids go, yes, Mom, we know. And I'm like, that's right. Because it is true. You know, that is automatically something. So I try really hard not to attack and just blanketly say groups of people are this, because I'm always wrong when I do it. That's just not how it flies. Well, you know, even now we can say WB sucks, but Charles Roven is pretty awesome, and we all know it. So, you know, okay, you know, we just, it's never going to work like that. It's not that simple. It's way more complex than that. You cannot simplify it down to such a thing. So,
I mean, that's one of my main feminist rules. Like, if I'm gonna, you know, set up my basic tenets of feminism is basically that: is it getting really simple? Is it getting really black and white? Okay, then you're probably wrong, because it should be really complicated. It should be really, really hard. It should be hard to think about, because all of that complexity, you have all of human nature. If you have made something really simple, you're usually leaving someone out completely. You're forgetting an entire group of people. Or what you've done is basically just use the patriarchal model on a feminist idea. Like, if you just say, like, well, we can't have naked women, then you're basically just saying the same thing as we can't have what women are supposed to do. Amy Adams is allowed to be naked on screen. She is. She can do that. And
well, and Amazons are allowed to show their midriff if they want to, you know? And so, you're right. This is like, but now you've just gone the other direction and freaked out. And, guys, you know? So, yeah. Yep,
it's too easy. Agree. It's what it is. It's too easy. And when it gets easy, you know you're probably not doing it right.
Oh, that's an awesome observation, and I'm going to take that and borrow that, and I will give credit.
It sucks. It means that it's really hard. It means that being an activist is really hard, but it should be hard, because it's a super worthy thing to do.
Interesting. That's really awesome. Okay, we've got all sorts of skiwampus over here. But I think we're still holding to the general idea, though, because a lot of people do feel betrayed, and a lot of people that feel betrayed in a big way are the marginalized types who have identified because Superman was not normal, because, you know, Amy Adams was given such an amazing role, because, you know, because of all these things that are not the norm, they connected with that, but the rest of the world that's not marginalized did not connect with it, and then suddenly we lose out again because we're not the majority, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating, and I've noticed for a long time, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this too, that I tend to enjoy things that most of the world thinks is fairly lame, you know, or it doesn't have a great opinion, and I'm like, but I thought that was good. Like, you know, I don't know what your problem was.
I literally on Tuesday gave a speech in my class about how Jupiter Ascending was actually a textbook good movie, because it does exactly what it sets out to do, and that everybody who's ever said that Jupiter Ascending was a bad movie is oversimplifying and probably should shut their mouth. Awesome, way to go. This is exactly how I feel about the Star Wars prequels. You know, you can call me a prequel lover. I'm sure that'll make people freak right out, but you know what? Those were good films, you know. I really enjoyed them, and they did what they set out to do. Anybody who wandered in and expected to get, you know, something packaged first trilogy was entirely wrong, and that was their bad for having that expectation. Well, then they got the Force Awakens later, so I know. So what are you griping about it? 10 years, you know. So, but yeah, and I agree. Most of the time, I'm like, oh, I like that Man from U.N.C.L.E. That was really good. Wow, how did it get such lackluster response? I thought King it was Arthur. You know? Thank you, King Arthur. I was like, that's really amazing. Look at the style. That is so cool. I need to get this on DVD, you know. And then I literally was like, I need a list of Guy Ritchie movies, because what happened?
And that's the funny thing too. Like, I remember when I saw Man from U.N.C.L.E. in theaters, I saw that as like a double feature. It was that and Straight Outta Compton on the same night. Which is definitely it's an experience on its own, seeing both of those movies back to back.
Yeah, I bet.
And I love both movies. I think both movies are great. But it's funny going for. I saw Man from U.N.C.L.E. first, and then I went to go eat, and then I saw Straight Outta Compton. Man from U.N.C.L.E. I would say the theaters that maybe like
tone shift. Holy crap!
I know. To go
That's
from
amazing.
Like you're a bad spy cowboy to like fuck the police. I'm like, okay.
We can do both.
I know. I just remember like audience-wise, like Man from U.N.C.L.E. having like a third of the seats filled, and it was opening weekend, and then Straight Outta Compton, I was like literally struggling to find a seat. It was just like, and Straight Outta Compton like deserved it. I mean, like of the two movies.
Yeah. No, you're right. It just shows that what people wanted to come and see. You know, what they wanted to dedicate their time to, and what they didn't. You know, so yeah, I find myself on the outside a lot when it comes to. I thought that was cool. Oh wait, the rest of the world hated it. I'm just starting to start making it a badge of honor now and be like, suck it, I love this movie, you know, because
I've been that way for a long time about a lot of movies.
It's actually helped me in that way a lot, where it's like, you know what, no matter what you say, there's other people out here who enjoy it as much as I do. I just have to find them. Also, and no matter what you say, just because you think it's bad doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that you didn't see it the same way I did, and I'm totally good with that.
Also, at this point, no matter what you say, I've already heard it. Touch me. It's over. I've already heard every single thing that you could possibly say about how much you hate this movie, and it doesn't even touch me anymore. I literally just got in an argument with someone on Twitter the other day, and I was just like, hey, if you can't get over yourself, I don't want to have this conversation. Like, I just, like, got to the point where I was like, I'm just done. I'm not gonna argue. Like, literally. Like, I have completely benign conversations with people that then go to my Twitter page where my header is a DCEU header, and then bring up DC in the middle of an unrelated conversation. And I'm just like, okay, well, I think I'm done now. Because, like, you have nothing interesting to say on this topic. Trust me.
People are crazy. That's all I gotta say. People are just nuts.
I don't understand how they think, like that's the thing is, like, the fact that you didn't like something that I liked is immaterial to me. Like, why would you think that matters? Who are you? Like, and, you know, who do you think you're talking to?
Back last year, I made a whole video called In Defense of Zack Snyder. And I got so many people who were like, Oh my god, you Zack Snyder fans are so pathetic. You made a whole video talking about how much you like his movies and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, see, this video was made because of assholes like you, and you deleted it, and now your opinion means nothing. So.
I'm gonna go back and like that video, Nick. At the bottom, I'm like, this is like the best video I've ever done.
I'm just like, you're making the point of why I made this video in the first place. So if anything, thank you for helping me make this video. Like, it's some people
for real, and that's the thing is that these people really do. The haters have really given me a great rhetorical structure around which to talk about these films, and that's one of the ways that I kind of owe them. Is that I don't think I would have appreciated these films as deeply if these people hadn't come in and tried to pick it apart and help me to realize that there's no deconstructing it. There's no. You know, there's not just deconstructing it, but there's no debunking it. Like, there's no pulling it apart. There's no nitpicking. You can pick at this for as long as you want to, but everything that you've said that is a bad thing about it is either A, something I appreciate, or B, something that I feel like you didn't fully understand.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, and that's
exactly.
A lot. But yeah, the standard, I think it's just the bandwagon mentality that kills me. But we had dinner guests the other day, and the first thing they come out, well, Batman vs. Superman was not a good movie, and the entire table went still, and my husband looked at me, and I was like, okay, so we're going to talk now, you know, and 10 minutes later, they were like, okay, well, you know, I've never looked at it from that point of view. I'm like, right, you know, so from a literary standpoint, these movies are masterpieces, but, you know, can you say the same thing about, you know, the thing you love? And they were like, so, oh my gosh, you know, the Travis is like,
hey, how's it going?
Cannot believe they said that at the table. What is, you know, like, oh no, here we go. Here she goes. She's gonna talk now.
That's half of it. Is a lot of times people just shut up in order to shut me up. Like, a lot of times I'll just be like, well, I can talk about this for years because I'm enjoying it. You're not having any fun in this conversation now, so.
Star Wars now, and I'm like, go ahead, talk about Star Wars. I can talk about Star Wars too. Let's talk about this. And they were like,
and that's the second thing too. Is that,
they want to say it, and they want to get you to be like, you're totally right, and they assume you'll agree with them until you don't. And then they're like, and then they're not quite sure what to do with that because they're not really good at debate. And you're right, the haters have really helped me on that score. And it's like, oh, come on, buddy, bring it. Let's see what you got. And half of them are like, never mind. And they put their tail between their legs, and then they change the subject. And it's actually kind of liberating.
And you know, it's the funny thing too is that like a lot of these conversations I have with people like in real life, the conversations don't hold up. Like all these people like want to like yell and scream over Twitter and Tumblr or whatever. When it comes like face to face, they're like, no, like when I was at Comic-Con this past year, people were like, oh my god, like you're a DC, like why are you wearing that shirt? Like don't you realize those movies suck? And I'm just like, well, I enjoy them. And, you know, yeah, I'm really just like, no, I actually really enjoy them. And they're like, oh, okay then, and that's it. Because they can't like think of anything smart off the top of their head to say back to me because I'm just like, well, I like it.
Yep. My favorite, don't you know those movies suck? Oh my gosh. Yes, I totally know it. I know it inside and out. I know it down to the bottom of my core, but I wear this shirt anyway because I hate myself. Like, what do they expect? I don't understand what they want, but okay.
Well, no, that was like a couple months ago. I was at Target of all places, just trying to get a phone charger, and I'm wearing like my Man of Steel shirt, and I'm like, because it was a lockdown. I'm trying to get a phone charger, and I go to the guy working at the tech department, and I'm like, oh hey, can I get some help getting a charger? He's like, oh no, with that shirt. I'm like, what? He's like,
oh my
come on. He's like, and then he's another person who's like, oh man, those movies are so bad. Like, you like them? I'm like,
here we go.
And I just sat there. I'm like, well, I really enjoy these movies. And then I went to be, I'm like, he's like, oh, so what do you think about Marvel movies? I'm like, I think they're okay. I mean, like, I don't like love them as much as I used to. And like, frankly, I looked at like, because it was like I think Homecoming was still in theaters. He's like, oh, you haven't gone to see that? Okay. It looks so good. I'm like, it looks bland to me, to be honest. Like. I don't want to see Iron Man 3.5 or 10.5 at this rate. Like, and I saw like, and that was my mentality. Like, I wasn't trying to bash the movie. I'm just like, that's my honest opinion, and I'm not trying to shit on you for liking the movie, but. And he wrote me into this.
I mean, when you ask, like,
I know you asked what I thought.
If you don't want to know, don't talk to me. Like, don't say, oh, you like those movies.
Who are we talking about here? Is it Star Wars or is it Batman v Superman?
movies at the moment.
I've been quiet for a good 5 minutes since I stood here, and I was like, "What are you guys talking about?" Sorry.
No, we're just talking about
we were talking about films that we love that everyone else hates, and then we just got back to DCEU again. But
we were talking about like King Arthur and Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Arthur.
Yeah, I you know what's funny? I had the opportunity to see that movie for free, like on multiple.
We've seen it like 7 times. I'm so serious.
I had to give the video back, and I was so sad, so I went and put the DVD on my wish list for Christmas immediately. It's at the top. This one right here.
Okay, so my quick question for those of you who have seen King Arthur, like, because I know some people have brought the name up since King Arthur came out. How would you guys feel if they brought Guy Ritchie in to do Man of Steel 2? Like, just what would you guys think?
I think he'd do really well because he's worked with Henry, and I think that he kind of has similar approaches to movie making as Zack. Maybe not Zack Snyder level, but if you watch The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Arthur, I don't know how movies are made, but it feels like they're more not deep, but they don't lack substance, if you get what I mean. But it's not like I don't understand how
they're not just fluff, you know.
He's not just like any old director. So I feel like he'd do really well because he's already worked with Henry Cavill, and I think he's got good connections with quite a lot of actors as well. Who else was in?
Armie Hammer. I mean, you already got Green Lantern in there.
Hammer, yes. Especially if Armie Hammer is actually Green Lantern, and
I would love that.
You know,
I think as long as he handles Clark's masculinity very similar to the way that he handles Arthur's in King Arthur,
yes.
I would be super on board.
Yes, really you're right. Man from U.N.C.L.E. I love Man from U.N.C.L.E., but I'm still like, I don't totally know if, I don't know. I guess Peril was, is better. Ilya, I liked how he handled him. I mean, he beat people up and stuff like that, but he had some vulnerabilities and some issues that I actually really appreciated that made him more human. And so I guess that. But you're right. If he handled his masculinity in the same way as he did Arthur, and he wasn't just this ball-busting, toxic, masculine figure, I think he could handle it. So, yeah. And I actually really enjoyed some of the choices he made in Arthur. It felt like it's not like he hasn't been doing movies forever, and he's done some cool things in some other movies, but that one was particularly stylistic, and I liked it. I liked that approach. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So
I felt like A Man from U.N.C.L.E. was very interesting to watch the way it was made, and it felt really.
It was very much a throwback to the 60s show. Like, he didn't make it exactly like it, but he went with 60s era filmmaking. With the split screen and the dividing off and the, and the special lighting and all that kind of thing. Like, he really went back to the show and went, okay, it was made during this time period, and then adapted his cinematography and his style to fit that, which I did love. I did really love that, and I wasn't bothered at all. Yeah. So.
What other movies are by Guy Ritchie? As far as I remember, it's
he did the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock ones, and I don't think I remember anything beyond that. What else he done?
There's nothing in those films that's
those movies. But for me, purely because I cannot stomach Robert Downey Jr., it's just really hard for me to watch those movies. But I know a friend that adores that movie, and it's their Christmas tradition to watch Sherlock Holmes.
Neither one of them are bad, but I wish he would do more with the women. Like, please stop, and he's not the only one, but please stop whacking the female love interest just for the sake of angst. Stop it. I swear. That just drives me crazy. So I wish he'd do a little bit more with that in those films. However, I did appreciate how much Mary got in the second one. I didn't expect her to have that much. And while he quickly shunted her away from all of the action, so that it could be just Sherlock and Watson as always, he did a good job of at least giving her something to do and making her capable and strong on her own in the background. Like, she was the one running the paperwork and the books and everything, and took down the system from behind the scenes while they were out doing the action stuff in the front. And that I appreciated, even though it severely diminished her screen time. So, it's a give and take with that. But
it's
yeah, I
been
agree.
many years since I saw
bad.
those Sherlocks,
No.
but the only thing that I recommend that I remember was the cinematography. So that's, I think, for
Cinematography
me,
was good.
that's an endorsement. Is that I actually
It is, yeah.
I don't remember much about what Robert Downey Jr. was doing in that movie, and I remember
His
T-Ball was
character
hot,
was pretty
but that's
good. He was fine.
default.
Watson was fine. I admit being shocked. See, again, this is how used to things I've gotten in Hollywood and media in general. I was shocked when Watson and his wife are brand new newlyweds on the train, ready to start their honeymoon and getting ready for, good times together and stuff. And then a guy brings in champagne they didn't order, and they get a little whiff of something's odd, and then the guy whips out a weapon of some sort, I can't remember what it was, stuff like that, and Watson, struggles with them, and this and that, and the other, it's the classic, but she was the one that grabbed the gun, aimed it at his chest, and said, "Open the door, John," and I was like, heck yes, you go, Mary. It was nice to see a woman be able to go, no, I'm going to help with this, I'm not just going to sit off to the side and go, oh, honey, and it was really, really nice, and yeah, it's only now that I look back I realize, holy crap, I've been just watching it for so long and letting it pass over me that it's like, yep, it's the same crap over again, that I'm shocked when small things like that happen. That's sad, guys. That is sad. That's really sad.
So,
anyway, so yeah,
But we were talking about what the DCEU. We were talking about what the DCEU films mean to us, and I really kind of want to get back to that since we have a potential third story now.
Yes.
What third story?
Not to put you on the spot, Fatma, but we kind of talked about a little bit about our personal experiences of it, and I just was kind of hoping that I'm a glutton for these. I'll never get enough personal narratives about this stuff. But did you want to share anything about that?
I mean, it started off. Right, I'm gonna come from the Chris Nolan era.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So I don't know what your opinions of him are, but I don't think they're in the positive as far as I remember last time me saying anything about him. But
I'm really critical of Christopher Nolan, but I loved his movies.
I would say I don't hate the Dark Knight trilogy. I liked them because I didn't know any better until I got this, and I'll admit this is a step up, but I still liked them for what they were, so it's okay. There's no bashing here.
I still think they stand up. I just think,
yeah. So I always loved Batman the animated series when I was a kid. I'd watch it when I was when it was a cartoon series, and I never understood why he never killed the Joker, and he never got rid of him fully. And when I was a kid, I was like, just get rid of him, just
it'd be so easy.
Yeah, because you always end up having to deal with him, and he's always in prison, and you have to work around him. Sorry, I have some water running next to me. Could you hear that?
Just a little bit. It's all good.
So it started off then, but then for a while, my experience with the DC universe and Batman, it died down for a while, and then the trilogy came back up, and I was like, oh my god, I love this. I used to love this. I used to watch the animated series. This was my life for a while. And then it got me back into comics. I only delved into comics afterwards. But with the DCEU, as soon as I was like, oh, when's the next movie after The Dark Knight Rises, or I saw that Marvel had their movies, and I tried to get into them. I did try to watch them and enjoy them, but they just didn't do anything for me. So they're not, I just don't watch them, and I don't particularly enjoy them. X-Men do, because I like the lore that, and the idea of mutants and the scientific aspect of it, because I'm a scientist. But other than that, it was always on DC. And then as soon as I knew that Man of Steel was coming out, I was like, yes! Oh my god, I'm going to go to this movie theatre and watch it. And I knew about the reviews and the critical, critical view that people had of it. But it wasn't as hated as Batman v Superman was, which was really, really surprising for me. Because, the vitriol and the hate that people have towards the DC universe, I think it started with Man of Steel because it was so divisive, and it had people who absolutely loved it, and there were only a little bit of people who were like, nah, whatever, it was a good time, and then there were people who were like, no, this is not my Superman, he doesn't have the widest grin. He isn't like super cheerful and whatnot. And then you have people who are like, no, I loved it. And I was part of the people who loved it. I enjoyed it. I thought like some of the scenes were just spectacular to watch. The one where he just comes out of the Fortress of Solitude. I'm actually quite surprised that I remember the name of that, because it's late here and like I've had a really busy week. So I will be asking for your help, guys. So when he was getting out of the Fortress of Solitude and he was just like flying, the way it was made and the feeling that he had, how he smiled and how he laughed, how he connected to Martha, and that scene in the cupboard when she was trying to calm him down, and as Clark Kent when he was a child, and how he had that connection to his family. I mean, I saw that and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, why are people having an issue with this? I can see his humanity, the side of his humanity, but I can also see him being a superhero as well. When he saved the kids from the bus, people were like, well, he never saved anyone, he never tried, he was just, I'm never going to save anyone. Sorry?
What?
Yeah, so it was like, I saw that, and then I saw the parts when he was flying around the world, when he was going through the zebra, I don't know, it was a safari somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just fantastic to watch, and I enjoyed it, and I connected with him, and I thought I just wanted to see more, like, Welcome to the Planet. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's more things to see at the end of that movie. I really, really enjoyed it. Back then, there wasn't really a big DCEU fandom. I think you're story advocate on Tumblr, aren't you, Katie?
Yes.
So, do you remember me? Did we have each other back in Man of Steel days?
Yep. Yep. I distinctly remember when you guys started the Man of Steel positivity tag, and it was such a blessing. I could not find people who liked these movies. Like, I mean, everywhere, like my own family and everything, but on the internet, on Tumblr, stuff like that, it was like this thing you never spoke about because it was so bad. And it was so hard to find people who liked it. And I remember distinctly bumping into I don't remember whose it was, but Danielle's before you changed your name, and Fatma, you were there, and there were a couple others. And
I was so much braver back in the day.
And somewhere along the line, somebody put a post about why they appreciated it, and it was called "Why I Love Man of Steel" or something like that. It is still saved on my tags that I follow on Tumblr, you know, because I was so excited that other people liked it, and I was like, "Holy crap!" And so when you, and I can't remember who it was, started that tag, I was so beside myself excited to find other people who loved this film, loved that film like I did. It was like, holy crap! And I just like jumped in the middle of you guys and was like, you know, because I was so excited.
You know what's funny? I just kind of realized we got some really like OG Tumblr Man of Steel fandom here. I think like the four of us were all there at the same time.
Fandom, aren't we?
You can tell that. You can tell the people who still tag their stuff Man of Steel, like positivity and stuff. Like that always warms my heart, because I'm like, I know you're from way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, because it was horrible.
Or anything Defense Squad.
I know.
Yep.
Zack Snyder
Defense
all
after Suicide Squad though.
When you guys started that, I was so happy, and it was so wonderful to be able to come in and talk about that and talk about what you loved. I read everybody's post who ever wrote anything in that tags I loved. I was so excited, and it was such a wonderful positivity moment, you know, and it really did. It bred something good. So you did awesome stuff. You did good works. You know, it was great. It was great.
We're a very small community as well. Like the reblog count, if it hit 1,000, you'd be like, "Whoa!"
I know.
We're growing.
Yeah.
If it hit 1,000, that was a good sign that someone from outside of the fandom had come in to fight with us.
I know.
That was the thing. Is that like half of it was just like reblogs of people being like, "This is terrible. Like, how are you taking this seriously? You guys are so stupid." And you're like,
oh,
okay.
Too, like back in the day,
and the thing is this fandom was so civilized back then.
I know.
Is people would be like, your feelings are very valid, but here's why you're absolutely objectively wrong.
You know what's funny? Because I feel like Danielle, we kind of had this conversation like not too long ago. Like we only ever had like the one bad egg at the time, and he's still around, unfortunately. Fucking Soldier of Krypton, whatever his name is.
Yep.
Like, he was the one person. Like, I don't care if he hears this or
You
not.
gotta keep an eye on him.
I know, he's been a problem since, like, day one. And, like, I remember I called him out one time, and he's like, I don't care, I just love being an asshole. I'm like, what?
Great.
Really good at it.
Just the worst Superman fan that's ever existed. Like, that's the thing that pisses me off, is, like, you can be an asshole, but you don't get to be a Superman fan at the same time.
I know.
Like, if you're incompatible, you need to stop.
Like Clark Kent would
find
be so
a new
disappointed in
fandom.
you.
So nice in my comments is because it's like, I know the Superman would handle this better. I know that sounds, like, but it is really a matter of, how we respond does reflect on who we are and who we admire. And so I really, really try hard. I've lost my grip a couple times, but when I'm really, really feeling strongly about something, but most of the time I try to hold it in. But just on a minor sub point, Danielle, like way back when you made a post about how much you loved the depiction of the civilians of Man of Steel, and how even the cop, yelling at them, come on this way, and stuff like that, and they all started running before the building fell down and stuff like that, and how that meant so much to you, just seeing regular people doing good things and trying to do, and trying to help, and how beautiful that was. And then some fool, like a year later, came along and was talking about how the people in Winter Soldier were doing that, and this is why they like this Marvel so much better than DC and this, that, and the other. And I was like, dude, that's such crap. You're such a liar. But I was just going to scroll past it and be like, whatever. And then, like, I swear, 2 posts later, you came in and were like, all right, and I was like, yay!
That shit makes me so mad. It makes me so mad because I remember how disillusioned I got with the Avengers. I remember how disillusioned I got with the Avengers after I saw Man of Steel, because I watched the last scene and I was like, oh my god. Like, this is shot in a way that doesn't give any honor to the people on the ground and makes them all look like idiots and makes the entire city of New York look like they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And, and doesn't give any credit to, like, the kind of people who would be on the ground, like actual cops who, are doing their jobs and shit. And I watched that final Avengers scene over and over and over and over again to try and figure out what was different. So by the time people got to that point where they were like, whoa, look at them, like, I was like, nah, bitch. No, we're not gonna. You don't even get to start. You don't even get to start.
So, yeah. And it's so true, and it has changed my perspective on just movie making in general. I cannot watch something with kind of a little bit more stilted and funky dialogue, or just straight up bad dialogue and stuff like that, and not turn to my husband and go, people say my films have bad dialogue, and look at that. I can't do it. And I can't watch like city destruction scenes, like what is it, what's that second Star Trek, the Wrath of Khan one, sorry,
Into Darkness,
that, like, he crashes that spaceship into the city, like takes down a building or 2 or 8, on his way down, and just crashes down. And I know he's the bad guy, but nobody breathes a word. Yeah. And I'm like, what? Like I can't watch stuff like that anymore when there's huge masses of destruction, and yet nobody seems to mind, but everybody freaks out all over Man of Steel, and it's just like Avengers Age of Ultron, when they have that giant Hulk and Iron Man fight in the middle of the city, and yet it's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be lighthearted, and nobody says a word, and I'm like, what? Like, it's entirely changed my perspective about how I view these things, because it's like the hypocrisy is just everywhere, and it freaks me out. I'm like, you can't get all upset at Clark for not handling all the parts of damage in Man of Steel and think that this is perfectly okay. What's wrong with you? Like, it doesn't work like that. The way that we handle violence in these films says a lot about us, and that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be violence. And that's the thing, is that a lot of these feminist perspectives get in there and they're like, well, you can't like superhero movies at all because the basic precept is violence. And it's like, there's nothing unfeminist about violence. I mean, like, violence in the name of justice is absolutely something that, like, you can't skip straight ahead to utopia. You can't say, well, violence shouldn't exist. And it's like, well, okay, but it does. So are we going to deal with it, or are we just going to pretend like it doesn't exist? Because like, sexism also exists, but, like, we're not just like, oh,
oh, well, because it shouldn't exist, we're going to pretend it doesn't, and it should never depict it in
and yet
film.
the world is suddenly over now that so many stories are coming out and it's becoming an open thing, and we're like, dude, this is going around forever.
And if we handle that violence, and there's plenty of studies on the fact that if we handle that violence in a way that negates consequence, that takes the consequence out of it. Like we show children cartoons in which the consequence of violence is pointless.
Yes.
Then we end up with really violent kids. And when we show adults violence with consequences, they get very, very upset. But that's an upsetness that they should feel, because violence shouldn't be fun. It shouldn't be fun to watch a superhero hit another superhero in the face. It shouldn't be fun to watch an entire city get demolished because of, you know, a metaphorical white supremacist. Like, that shouldn't be fun. None of that should be fun. And if you think it should be, then something's wrong with the culture and not the film itself. And that's the thing. That was my big sticking point back in the day, because, like, I was really, really into, like, you know, this idea that, you know, what happened with Zod was wrong, that what happened to Metropolis was wrong, that all of that stuff was like bad decisions. And I think that's bullshit. Like, I take the same sort of, like, weird stance that Jason did back in the day when he was like, I think that Zack Snyder fucked up with Superman a bit. I pushed my chair back from the fucking table. And I was like, do you want to talk about it? Tell me your thoughts.
No, I totally agree. And the way he dealt with the violence makes people feel more uncomfortable than, like, Avengers, where there's a happy soundtrack behind it, and buildings are getting demolished, and people are running and screaming for their lives, but you're not really actually seeing any death or anything, you know. And it's so much easier to just kind of accept it as what happens, and it's totally okay, you know. And so
Joss is really good at making it beautiful, like making frightened women look beautiful, making you know, violence look gorgeous, and that's a huge problem. And it's a problem that I know he's definitely propagated in this genre.
It's been around for a long time
in genre stuff. I mean, but he's pushed it to the limit. I mean, most of his stuff, if you look at his filmography, a great amount of his filmography is full of that sort of, like, stylized, beautiful slow motion violence that you know, is bloodless and doesn't have any consequences. And, you know, I mean, like, when he kills someone, it's like an exception to the rule, not the rule. Yes. And it's like, but people die in this stuff all the time. Like, the fact that it's special whenever Joss kills someone is just because he does it so sparingly. And that's the trick that you never learn as a Joss Whedon fan. And it's the thing that took me a million years to figure out, because I used to be totally in awe of the way that he would kill characters. But then I realized that, you know, most of these fights are totally bloodless. So when someone does die, it's a big deal. But that's not the world. The world is people dying every single minute.
There's also, just in media in general, it's pervasive through everything, and so it's not just one person who has a problem with that. But, like, there's a serious issue with the violence not actually being realistic, and I don't know how else to describe this except that, you know, you can, like, beat somebody down and stuff like that, and where in real life they would have permanent brain damage, health problems for the rest of their lives. Things would not heal back up right. You know, there would be lasting consequences in this person's body for the rest of their life that is never ever portrayed. They come back, they're in full form again. They just need a few minutes to recover. We'll slap a couple steri strips on their little owies on their face and make them look damaged, and then everything's good. And it, you know, like, when you break bones, when you rip you know, joints out of sockets and stuff like that will always be a compromised area. It will never go back to complete normalcy ever again. And we in the media regularly treat it as if it would. And the whole idea of the trope of knocking people unconscious. No. So, like, you hit people in the head and they lose consciousness. This is, number one, a very bad thing. And number two, a red flag for, you know, a concussion. And number three, like, I just watched a lady who was in a car accident and had a concussion and didn't function properly for 3 weeks afterward. and had to consciously rest her brain and rest herself in order to be able to recuperate, and could tell when she was overdoing it because it was compromising her progress in her recuperation. It is not something that you just get whacked on the head and wake up 2 minutes later and you're good. You know, like, so the media in itself, and it's been going on for decades too, and it's pervasive through everything, you know, comics and movies and TV shows and you name it, doesn't matter, heck, books even, but they all have that idea that this works for my plot, so I'm going to do it, but it gives us the idea that there's far less consequences in it than there actually are. And you're right, it causes us as a society to misjudge what violence actually does, and the harm that it actually can do, and the consequences that come from it. You know, so it's just it's a wild thing.
If you're anti-violence, if you're not pro-violence, if you're anti-violence on a broad spectrum, is it more productive to hide that violence underneath some sort of, you know, video of it never happens? Or is it more productive to show that violence and then understand the consequences of that violence, and understand that it's not beautiful, that it's not breathtaking, that it's terrible, and that there are consequences and that people suffer. And that whole idea that we shouldn't be aware that people suffer is a basic idea that our society is built upon. That hiding of suffering, right down to the way that we consume animal product, is this idea that, like, you know, if you cover up the suffering of the animals that are providing our food, that it's like it never happened, and that there's a victimless crime happening.
Yeah,
like, this idea that suffering has to be concealed is something that I think the DCEU films fly in the face of, and it's really, really, really jarring for a lot of people. A lot of people take that and they get really, really upset really fast. Because
it feels uncomfortable, and so they come out.
It's terrible to be reminded that your entire lifestyle is based on the suffering of others. It's terrible to be reminded of that, but you have to be reminded of it in order to be, you know, if you really want to claim to be a good person, then I think you do have to regularly be reminded of that. I think you have to regularly say, like, okay, well, what are the consequences of me being in this position? Yeah.
We are quick to forget, so we do need the reminders, you know, or it's very easy to forget and then just go blind to that in time. So, yeah, completely agree.
And that's why, like, especially looking at the Avengers, when the marketing and stuff for Captain America Civil War was going on, when they counted the death toll in the Avengers as only 88 people.
Thank you! I remember that being a big
bothered
too,
me
and I
so
left myself
much.
stupid. I'm pretty sure,
like, one building was, like, at least 800 people. Like, it was just so odd that, like, the death toll was so low. I'm like, are you guys trying to say, like, oh, see, we can save more people than DC? I don't know what the fuck was going on, to be honest.
I think they were trying to, they've been, you know, suddenly it was, no, there needs to be accountability because that's what Civil War is built on. So we got to show that there are consequences, even though we totally glossed over them at the time. But now we're going to show consequences. But we've got to take the soft approach to this violence because we don't want to completely undermine everything that's gone before and our formula. So we're going to go ahead and downplay this number severely. You know, and just have it just a little bit. So there's consequences, but there's still soft, glossed over consequences. And we laughed at that number. It was like, you have got to be kidding me. There's no way, man. You know. So that post, I remember that post specifically, and it was the most feeble thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It was just at the point where it's like, I think we should tap out, guys, because this is getting sad. Like, we need to leave this poor person alone. Leave them alone with their delusions. They're hurting already. That's where that sheep mentality comes in. See, again, it's like they put it out there, assuming that everybody else will agree with them, because they really are under that impression that everybody, quote, everybody, hated, you know, Man of Steel or DCEU or whatever and stuff like that. So if they put this out there, they're just going to get lots and lots of applause and no dissenters because, quote, everybody hated it. And so they're always kind of shocked and surprised when people come out of the woodwork to go, excuse you, and take issue with what they said and try to prove them wrong.
If that isn't kind of what Tumblr is about right now.
It's true. And then they start backing up really fast, and I don't know, you know, so yeah, it's interesting, and yeah. I always have to remind myself there's always going to be people on the other side of this. No matter how crazy I think it makes them, there's always going to be people on the other side that don't agree with what I think. So if I put this out there, I need to be perfectly aware that somebody might come back and go, yeah, that's total crap. You know, it just is the way the world works. It's the way humans work. You know, I mean, at this point, you know, we can say up is down, or, you know, or we could say up is up and down is down, and somebody out there is going to go, that's total bullcrap. I think it's the other way around. You know, this is how people function, and we're getting really, really stubborn in like refusing to agree with each other. So, yeah.
And that's what, like, I just, like, there are times where even, like, I'll admit this, like, about myself, too. Like, there are certain, like, as an example, I hate Olicity and Arrow with a fucking passion.
Me too.
And there have been a couple times where, like, I've made a huge rant, whether it's on Tumblr or Twitter, and then I'm like, I type it out, then I'm like, do I really want to start this drama right now? Is it really worth it? And most of the time I say no, and sometimes I'm like, you know what? They're being really annoying, so you know what? Fuck them. So, like, and it's like, because I'll still get, like, notifications from, like, this random one about Odyssey, like, over, like, a year ago, and people still liking my tweet and being like, oh, yes, thank you, we hate Odyssey so much, and blah, 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 blah. Because it was from, like, I think I remember, because it was from, like, the crossover from the shows from last year, which had, like, it was, like, Arrow's 100th episode, and it was when they brought Katie Cassidy back for, like, the weird, like...
Oh, I remember that one, yeah.
And because there's a picture of her, and it was her and Oliver, and she was in a wedding dress, and so many Olicity fans were like, what have you done with Felicity? She's supposed to marry Oliver, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you Olicity fans need to calm the fuck down and take a step outside, and, like...
Yeah. Yeah. But, like, no, it's true. You need to take a deep breath and calm yourself. So that's okay. They just made themselves the worst wedding guest known to man this season. So, you know, like, lots of people are gunning for them now, which is honestly just, it doesn't hurt me at all. I didn't
it's funny because, like, like a few days ago, like, me and Danielle were
I was like, oh, I just hate you two together. You guys are bad
I just watched the crossover for this year just a few days ago.
That was the capper.
And I just finished watching it, and I'm like, what the fuck just happened in that wedding?
Right?
And then I'm like,
did you just interrupt the other couple's wedding, who's already been interrupted once trying to get married? Thank you very much. And they're way better than you. Like, you know, to ask Oliver to marry you right then? Did you? Oh my gosh! It just was like I
remember,
feel
like,
uncomfortable. Things aren't always about me, so I better, you know, jump on into this special moment. And it was just like, wow.
That's so funny too, because I was just on the phone with my sister who got engaged, and she's talking about, you know, like the possibility of my other sister getting engaged, and I was like, well, you should just tell him that, you know, like, double up. Just tell him, like, to just ask her at you know, at your wedding. And she was like, he would have to move the fuck out of the country. And I was like, okay. I was kidding, but Jesus Christ.
If they agreed beforehand and went, let's have a double wedding, you know, because we all, you know, this is all great and stuff like that, and we all want to get married, you know, as the four, and it's planned, and we're going to get married in a double wedding, that would be one thing. But I agree to go ahead and take somebody else's special day, you know, and then, like, to turn around and be like, by the way, it's all about me. It just seems
it's so characteristic of the crossovers is all it is. Like, that's the thing that was so tiring to me about it, is that, like, we had this beautiful moment with these really organic moment with these characters that we've been leading up to for forever, and everything's fine, and then all of a sudden Mark Guggenheim shows up and he's like, wait, how is this about Olicity? And we're all like, Mark, it's not. And Mark's like, no, like, but I understand that, but, like, how is this about Olicity? Like, is Felicity going to be in the center of this wedding? Or, like, you know, like
it's so wedding? True. Is she going to be, like, officiating it? Horrible.
And I'm like, shut up about your fucking OC. Stop.
Right.
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. All you're doing is pandering to yourself. You know, you are so full of yourself. Stop it. She's not the most amazing creation that ever happened. She's just not. Now get over yourself and move on. So, yeah, agreed. And honestly, you talking like that just reminds me of that video that came out right after we heard Joss Whedon was taking over Justice League. And it was something like this guy was pretending to be Joss on the phone with Zach. And he's like, Zach, I was wondering where the naked women went. You know, and he's like, what, there's not supposed to be any? You know, oh, okay. Well, what about the sexist jokes? You know, what, none of those either? This is really weird. Okay.
But what about the scene with Wonder Woman changing?
And now I'm like,
they're not doing that. That was honestly, like, the funniest video I had seen in the midst of all of that. He's like, hey,
That
Zach,
was
yeah,
great,
it's
right up
it's
until it
Joss, it's
became
the weed
true,
man.
And I went, oh, guys.
Oh God, I know that was yeah. And also, can we talk about?
Okay. Can I bring up the other elephant?
Oh yeah,
sorry,
I was just about to bring it up, but we can bring it up together. So there's something came out. Okay, something came out today that we talked before we recorded about, or like a little earlier. And it really frustrated us because you see, like now it's like what wasn't cut in Justice League.
Yes.
So they decided to cut Henry in the black suit.
Because,
Reasons.
why have something that epic and amazing and an incredible homage to the beginning of Man of Steel and the comic books, but, why do we need that? That's stupid. Anyway, go ahead.
I understand why. Because in order to give him the black suit, you'd have to give him more of a storyline and alter the vision that Zack originally had, because this Superman that we got in the theatrical was not any idea of what was originally planned for him, and for them to do all of that and everything, and then add on the whole CGI thing with the mustache would have just been far too much. And they had already paid far too much for the reshoots, and it was time consuming, and I think it was just pure laziness. And they were aiming for the 2-hour mark as well to get in more money, but had they gone in for the 3-hour mark and went along with Zack's vision with slight reshoots here and there, I think they would have got much more money than what they have now. But hey ho, that's happened. But I just think that's why they've deleted that. And I think there was I think you, Nick, it was Nick, you sent a video link about that. It was 30 minutes long, and it was
Kevin Smith, yeah.
Kevin Smith.
Oh yeah,
the deleted scenes. I kid you not. The first time I heard that list, because I've read a shorter version of that list somewhere as a Reddit post, but when I heard his whole list and the people two people in the audience were confirming it, I think it was a guy and a girl. I just had that shock. Honest to God, my sister was looking at me. She's like, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, "I cannot believe that they did not put this in the movie," and it makes so much sense. And the loss that we have because of what they didn't put feels so much worse. Like, we could have got an amazing Superman return. In the trailer, we saw Alfred meeting him, and apparently Zack wanted him to go into the amniotic chamber and get the mother box or whatnot, or maybe it's just far too many rumors at the moment. Sure. But it was just horrible to see that this is what we could have got and this is what we ended up with. And I mean, you could look at the theatrical cut and just think of it as a random version that they gave out as a joke, maybe. But but after all this, there's a crazy, like, scary radio silence coming from them regarding anything with Justice League. It's been more than next week it'll be a month, and they haven't said a single word at all. I've not heard anything official from Warner Brothers. I haven't heard anything official from any of the actors. Margot Robbie kind of hinted saying that studios should stand by the directors, but she didn't even say it outright. She just said it in the way that how she experienced it as being producer with I, Tonya.
That was very strategic. I was proud of her.
Yeah,
I was like, that's a business lady move.
She did it in a very, like, smart way, but she didn't. But that's pretty much all I've heard officially from anyone. Not rumors, not Reddit posts, not tweets, not random people saying this is what would have happened, and some of them are a bit far too fetched, and I wouldn't think Zack would have done. But it's like, if they want to make any money at all from this movie, they will have to seriously consider either running it again in cinemas with the actual cut and then giving that a go, or actually doing it with the DVD and Blu-ray. And if it is a full Zack Snyder cut or a completely different version, honest to God, I will be the first person on that list. But
Kevin brought up an interesting point in saying that, like, you don't need to definitely have that connecting tissue. If that connecting tissue doesn't exist, like, he was like, we would accept, like, you know, like those filled in, sort of like, oh, what's the word? I've forgotten it. The storyboards. Like, you could just fill in that blanks with storyboards and we'd be totally happy. We have a long history of embracing that kind of stuff. You know, down to, like, motion comics and stuff. Like, it's not something that's unheard of. Yeah. And it hadn't occurred to me before that's something they could do. But that is something that absolutely would fly if they wanted to. Like, really, if they really didn't have the content that they need.
They could just, like, turn it into a cartoon as well. Like, not even storyboard, animated series. Do they cost that much to animate?
I just can't believe, you know.
Compared to how much they
if you said with Fatma, if they'd gone for the 3-hour mark, even if they'd gone for 2.5-hour mark and kept Zach's vision and then gone ahead and just given us the extended cut later, I would still be happier because what we got was just this massacred, completely changed version of what was supposed to be, and just the more we hear about what we've lost, the more I grieve, you know. This is just, can't believe. Yes, and this is the problem. You said this from the beginning, and I said it too. It was like this, what Zach's vision was totally different. You know, like, it was so radically different that they can't just do an extended one and have it be Zach's vision, because it won't be. Joss has changed too much now. It needs to go back to, like, you know, the director's cut, Zach's original version that he gave them. You know, this is probably unfinished. You know, because otherwise it's not even going to work. You know, it's been changed that much.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder that if these changes haven't been made more than anything, not just because, like, they just kind of jumped the gun, because they're looking at what Zach had laid out based on, you know, the rumors and based on what it sounds like the movie is made of. It looks like Zach was really being a team player for, you know,
he has already changed a lot.
For what little people have, you know, for what little people other people have actually contributed to this in terms of being a team player, and he was actually, like, setting up stuff that could happen in the future. Yeah. And that's the thing that I'm wondering, if it wasn't like the reason that a lot of these changes were made wholesale is because so many of the things that Zach shot were things that alluded to the fact that we were going to continue in a particular direction, and that Warner Brothers wanted the ability to pivot completely off of that direction. And if they were actually heading for, like, you know, somewhat soft reboot territory, that they didn't want anyone to, because, like, here's the thing. There's no good reason besides maybe, you know, being short on VFX people to cut a shot of Darkseid. There's no good reason unless they don't want to promise
intentions to go there.
Unless you don't want to promise your audience Darkseid if you're not going to deliver. And that's the thing that I'm wondering. I'm wondering if this original intention was like, oh, of course we're going to have Darkseid. Of course we're going to go all the way with Justice League. Of course we're going to continue this story in exactly the way that Zack kind of laid out, because that was the blueprint in the first place, and it's a really good blueprint, to this point where they were like, oh no, we need something more flexible. We need something more open-ended. We're going to cut basically everything from this movie that might allude to the future, because everything that we saw, in my opinion, that has been cut from the Superman footage has been stuff that alluded to the future, has been, you know, they basically more or less cut the engagement. There's no confirmation of the engagement anymore, so that future is out. They cut Iris West, so they don't necessarily have to include Iris in anything in the future if they don't want to. They cut a lot of things.
Or they can recast her, which is crazy.
Which is bullshit. And if they want to, if they want to do that, they're going to have a lot of fucking pushback from me. It's going to be my whole life all of a sudden.
No, I don't think that. You know. So basically, at the beginning, I was 100% sure that they could not release a Zack Snyder cut, because I looked at the trailers and I looked, and like we've just mentioned now, that it looks like a completely different vision. But with the money that they've made from the vision that they wanted to soft reboot or whatever the fuck that cut was supposed to do in their minds. I honestly think the money will talk more, because for Justice League, the founding superhero group of all superheroes, whether Marvel likes it or not, Justice League is iconic.
Yep.
My mum, who wasn't even anywhere in the West, way back when, before we were here, she knew about Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman. She didn't know about anyone else. She knew about these iconic characters. And the fact that this movie has barely reached $600 million worldwide. I'm not even speaking about America here. Worldwide, it's just about reached there. And by the time it'll be done in the theatres, it'll probably reach 700. I don't know. I'm not going to predict, because maybe some miracle can happen and bring the numbers up. Highly doubt it, because the fans completely hate it at the moment. Well, partially do. So the only way that they can go around it is actually beg for Zack to come back. And I was sure that they weren't going to do that. I was like, the movie will make money and they'll probably go that way and they'll lose some fans, but to them, they've gained more by pleasing, I don't know, whoever
Critical
it is.
approval was a big deal. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, but you can't sit there and be like, and accept the good money that you got from Batman v Superman and the fans loving it and say, oh, we made this movie for the fans, this is for the fans, and then for this movie, you screw over your director, you screw over the actors were not happy. If you look at the interviews, it seemed like they were faking. They were faking the enthusiasm for the movie. You can tell that Wonder Woman didn't like the boob shot. You can tell that Batman hated the reshoots because he looks absolutely weird in them. You can tell that Aquaman was just trying to like. It felt like Jason, Ezra, and Ray were trying to like take it over because they've already done movies before. But Wonder Woman. So Gal, Ben, and Henry have done movies with Zack, and they know how great it is, and they know the experience that they went through, and then they have something that they can compare it to. I mean, yes, they had short cameos with Zack and BVS, but they worked with Zack. So then, when they reached this point, it was just like they're really excited for it. I'm super excited for Aquaman. I'm excited to see James Wan's vision, and I don't think Warner Brothers can in any way interfere with that because James Wan is.
I don't trust them at all now.
But again, you need to just go into that movie and expect it to be good or not good or whatever it is. You can't come in with expectations anymore.
My expectations are now severely low, and I'll just look into it and let them give it to me, and then I'll decide what I think. And I'm good with it.
So currently, I feel like the only way that they can go around it is maybe try another movie and do it whatever way that they wanted to go this way but didn't actually succeed because it looked shoddy, or go back to Zack Snyder and beg him to come back. But if I was Zack Snyder, I would just say, I'm sorry, I'm done now. I've been
what they do in the next year will be really telling, and it'll probably decide the future of the franchise. Because I think you're right. There's two directions they could go, and it's one or the other. And that's really their two options. They're either going to, lead into this and hope that it gets better, and hope that they basically acquire a new audience from scratch, because that's really what they're being asked to do. They lost their fan base entirely, and they're going to have to build a new one, and that is going to be a process that is a lot more shaky than they wanted it to be. And I think that whatever they decide to do in the next 12 months is going to be telling, and it's going to let us know what we can expect out of the future. Really viscerally. I think that's the first thing we're going to know.
Agreed. That's why I'm just waiting to see.
The first thing that we'll find out is the DVD releases and what they're going to do with the DVDs. And then after that, it'll be how it's Aquaman in my head, even though I've seen him. I saw him before he was Aquaman as Jason. Well, not as Jason, as other characters. But and how I feel sorry for Jason because he's the only one that's going to have to deal with the aftermath and all the interviews that he's going to get for Aquaman. And
he tries so hard to stay positive. He's going to get a lot of crap, and I don't really appreciate that.
Honestly, I think if anyone's going to handle it, I would be super pleased to have Jason handle it, because I don't think Jason has a filter. I really feel
he doesn't care. He doesn't care what the studio tells him to say.
The first thing Warner Brothers needs to do...
That could be a great thing.
The first thing Warner Brothers needs to do is handle this shit before someone asks Jason about it, because I can tell you that press tour will be hilarious if they don't.
It will.
That press tour is going to be a huge faux pas, because
he's not saying what he's thinking, and
he's gonna answer these questions off the cuff, and it's gonna be terrifying for Warner Brothers, because they have a giant web of lies, and they're not gonna hold up under Jason's scrutiny. Like, he's just gonna show up and he's gonna be like, well, this is what's happening, and people are gonna be like, you're not supposed to say that.
It was one way, and then they come back to something was a whole other way, and I was like, I thought this one was good, but whatever, okay, I guess, and now here we are. I mean, you're right. I can so see this happening.
Yeah, they're not ready. They're not ready for the PR disaster.
Yep.
It's gonna be amazing.
Well, the thing is, Jason absolutely adores and loves Zack in a way that is crazy for an actor to love the director in that way, and I'm really happy that he does. And I think at the same time, because he doesn't want anything to reflect badly on Zack or the future of the franchise and the future of his fellow actors that he's had a great connection with, I think he will have a filter just for that sake. And he has done it with Game of Thrones when he knew spoilers and stuff, and people would ask him and he'd stay quiet. I think for that sake, he's a great person, and he's very empathetic to the people around him, and it's a very sticky situation. So I think there will be a balance, and unless they find a way to work it out. But the fact that the number that I have now is absolutely, it's a joke. It's $567.4 million worldwide. That is ridiculous.
Can you imagine though? The thing is that for press tours for Batman vs Superman, all they had to do was defend the film that they believed in. All they had to do was sit there and be like, "Hey, I know you guys didn't like this film, but some people did, and we made it for those people." And that's the beginning and the end of it, and we think it's a quality film, and we love it. And that, that being true, and that being your absolute truth, makes a big difference in spinning, this publicity. But these people, they're gonna have to spend this Justice League, the aftermath of this Justice League thing, fueling these questions that that on a movie that they didn't like on a movie that basically was kind of a miserable experience in the last half, and kind of we have pretty good confirmation that they didn't enjoy the movie, and it's can you imagine even trying to promote something like this, something terrible and soulless that you think is not a pure reflection of your work? That's the worst thing about it, is that asking them to come out and be oh no, this is definitely what we meant to do, it's not a mistake at all. Warner Brothers, if they really had any respect for their talent, they would be taking the heat off of them. They would be okay, well, something's wrong here, and we're really sorry, and we're gonna work on it. We, details forthcoming, and then that would at least give the actors the ability to say, yeah, Warner Brothers is kind of not sure where they're gonna go, and they could have something to say besides the movie is great, shut up, we're just gonna embrace the lie that everybody loves it.
Yeah,
in the end, it's just a matter of they're too afraid to admit that they're wrong, they're too afraid to look weak, and they're too afraid to to be viewed as compromised in any way, which is and
I think after the merger that attitude might change. I think after the merger, this is a really weird, shaky financial time for them, and I think a lot of the silence is just sort of them figuring out this merger thing, trying not to sabotage the whole thing, and then afterward,
Warner Bros. With AT&T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I thought you were talking about the other major merger.
No. I mean, like, I'm sure that definitely...
There's so many mergers going on.
Yeah.
I can't keep it straight.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely affecting the way that they see their current financial standing, because holy shit, that's a terrible thing to happen to the whole genre. But I think that their merger, the AT&T merger, is definitely something that right now it'd be very bad business for them to look weak. And afterward, it might not be such bad. Like, that's probably my optimist side.
You're right, they're probably very much a wait-and-see attitude. So, yeah.
Yeah, it might not be the same.
But then, I know when you said, imagine, Danielle, when you said, imagine how you feel like promoting something that's like that. It's like, I don't care about Ben Affleck's personal life, but he's an amazing director. He's won Oscars. He's been in this business for far too long. He knows what the deal is, and he's done Batman, and he's done him in an amazing way. He's managed to get to grips with the character in Batman v Superman. So he's tasted the creme de la creme, and then getting to that, and then doing Justice League and doing that in a great way with Zack, and having that relationship and understanding how Zack films, and he's learned quite a lot from him too. He's like, this is amazing. Now I'll do this with my movies, and it's kind of like for Ben to go through that and then get into the reshoots and be like, what the fuck have I got myself into? I am now eating like own brand.
Why is this so different?
Own brand custard. After I've had the best of the best, and I'm just dealing with whatever shit this is, and that's because it's in my contract, but I can't back out, and the character is amazing. Imagine having to play Batman, but you want to leave the character. No one in their right mind would do that unless the character story is over and done with, and you'd be milking it after, i.e. Christian Bale. And I feel like to have such an iconic character like Batman or Superman, I don't know, I think Henry Cavill will want to stay regardless, just out of love for the character, but to be put into that box is horrible. And I know Gal has it easy because she's got Patty Jenkins, and I mean, I like what they're doing, but at the same time I feel, and I know Patty can't really say anything in defense of Zack, so I can't really say anything, but it's just horrible to have that feeling. I can't imagine. It's like,
well, and to add to that context,
it's why it doesn't shock me if Ben does decide to go.
We also have to keep in mind that, like, this was Ben's worst nightmare. This is exactly what he was afraid would happen. This is exactly what happened to him with Daredevil. This is exactly what he was afraid.
Poor man, he cannot win.
Like, it's a terrible thing to happen to him because, like, it's literally the one thing he was worried about, and he was assured that it wouldn't happen, and then it happened anyway.
Yeah. But it didn't happen in the way that people were hating on the character, his acting, because people hated the Daredevil as a character and didn't like the movie and didn't like him in that costume.
But if you see the director's cut of Daredevil, is actually a pretty decent, kind of gorgeous movie.
Me. No way, the director's cut was better.
Well, that's the thing, is that, like, it's essentially the same thing that happened to him before, which is that the studio screwed over a movie that he signed off on. And that's the thing, is that, like, it's just, like, all of this is just history repeating itself, and it's so frustrating because I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking, I'm looking at the Richard Donner context of this. I'm looking at all of this stuff where basically we've been making this mistake over and over and over again for decades, and Warner Brothers cannot get out of it. Like, I have to give credit, at least, to the MCU, to Marvel Studios, for being like, hey, let's break the cycle of violence against these movies and actually, like, see if we can't do them justice and put the people who are creatives in charge and actually let them have some, like, whatever amount of freedom they have, like, whatever they're doing is actually working, and whatever Warner Brothers is doing is just repeating the same goddamn mistakes. And that's so frustrating.
What bothers me is when people are like, well, maybe in 20 years we'll get Zack's version. It's like, I don't want to wait 20 years, okay? If I have to wait 20 years, I'm going to kill somebody, you know, because basically it means 20 years have to pass. People have to die. Management has to be replaced out of retirement or old age or illness or death or whatever, you know what I mean? So that people can finally go, you know what? I think a disservice was done and maybe we should rectify that. Also, it could get us extra money. But see, that doesn't fix anything about right now because they flatly refuse to admit that they made a mistake. You know, I'm sorry, but it's a mark of maturity in my book for you to go, you know what? I made a bad call there. I misjudged, you know. Okay, let's fix that. Here, it might not be exactly perfectly canon with the rest of the way we're going to do the universe, but here is Zach's vision. Knock yourself out. You know, like, that would restore some, but it means they've got to admit they made a mistake, and they can't seem to do that. And only 20 years later, when everybody's died and all the management has turned over into new people, can they approach that possibility? And that is crap.
Well, that's the thing, is that 20 years later, one of, you know, the people who are in the fandom right now are going to be the people in charge of Warner Brothers, because that's the way the cycle works, and they'll be making actual good decisions about these films because they'll be able to see them for what they are. And that's the thing that really sucks about the whole industry. That's the thing about comic books that really sucks, is that, like, right now, the people who are making decisions about what happens with these characters are, like, 50-year-old men who have absolutely no understanding for the audience and is basically just mad at them because that's, like, the boomer default position, is just being pissed off at the younger people. But, like, basically just being pissed off at their own audience. And, like, being resentful of their own audience. And how can you make that work? You can't. It's toxic to the creative process.
Yeah.
Well, we do it wrong.
Like, looking at this whole situation, like, it's
just so sad. So, anyway,
it was so easy for Warner Brothers to be like, oh, see, we're just gonna make Justice League lighter. It was easy for them to say, oh yeah, you guys didn't like Batman v Superman, so we're gonna change Justice League for you. And now that it hasn't worked on any level, they're quiet. Because, of course, they don't want to admit they fucked up. And they fucked up.
Had it been successful, they'd have broadcast that from the rooftops. You know, you're right. They would have gone all crazy for it. It's just, yeah. They can't do that now because it didn't work. And now I don't think they know what to do. And it's just... Yep.
Guys, I literally can't get over the number. Like, how on earth has Justice League just made that much? It's honestly sad.
But
I'm like,
very sad.
Also, that's
I tried. I watched it twice, okay?
Yeah.
I'm going on Thursday. I'm going again, but, like, you know, it's like one of those popcorn things. Like, I'm in the mood for popcorn. Let's go see Justice League.
I saw it 3 times.
I really need to see this movie
that, I was
again.
Like, I can't see anymore. You know, I get so angry.
I might
and
see it,
you
like,
know,
one more time, but, like, at this point, like, I just don't have that drive to keep seeing it more and more. Like, again, like, I'm gonna get it on Blu-ray regardless, just to have it. Just be like, well, here's my finished DCEU collection, you know. But
like, in that tone of voice, exactly.
No, and it's
like, well, honestly, here it is for whatever.
I was on, that's the suck part. It's not even like, come on. Like, Batman v Superman was like, hurry up! It's been out of the theaters forever. I'm dying, man. I gotta see it again. Come on.
You know, and now I'm like, thing about the whole Batman v Superman thing is too. Like, I bought that movie brand new the first day it came out on Blu-ray, and then within like weeks it like went down to like $10. I'm like, I was like, are you kidding me? And then, like, I've gone on this in the past, and that's why I hate, like, what Disney does with their movies. Like, Iron Man is, like, $30 on Blu-ray still. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Like, if this movie is, like literally, like, 10 years old.
Wait, why? Why is it that much?
Exactly.
Because it's Disney.
Cheap, yeah.
That's it. Because it's Disney. Yep.
And it's, like, look, I literally, just,
you don't have
for
that
Black Friday,
there.
like, I bought Wonder Woman on Blu-ray, $7. $7 for a brand new movie.
Yeah.
Black Friday. And like, Disney never participates in Black Friday because they're like, you know, we need to get every bit of money we can get out of everything we make because we need to keep staying the richest company in the world. And it's
the vault.
Exactly
it's
why.
The fucking vault. I hate it. Like as a kid, like, I know we're getting really off topic here, but as a kid, I hated when it's like, when it's coming out of the vault or before it goes back into the vault, you need to get this movie and blah blah blah. I'm like, if you're gonna be that stingy, I was gonna fucking buy it on VHS. I'll get an old VHS player. I can get it for like $2. Like,
for real.
Yep.
It's that's what I hate. I have problems with Disney on that end. Like, like it's hard for me because I'm torn because I have a Disneyland annual pass and like my fiance and I like just went the other day. Like Disneyland itself is so much fun, but Disney as a company when it comes to handling movies and shit, that's when I'm like, okay, you know, I could really care less. But,
I'm like a weird person with Disney. Like I enjoyed the Disney princesses movies. I enjoyed Pixar, sorry, and I've enjoyed some of their movies, but I don't like the over. Like it's very it's saturated. The word it's just everywhere.
Oversaturated.
Like,
yep.
Like I've never had the dream of going to a Disneyland, either Paris, Florida, or is there one in California?
Yeah, so we have Disneyland in California.
That's the original
and
one.
In Florida,
yep.
we have
Or
Disney
Disneyland
World.
or World or whatever it is. You know, the place where you see the castle and the Walt Disney hoops around the castle and fireworks and whatnot. It's really weird. Like I enjoyed the movies and the classics, Lion King, Snow White.
Lion King's my all-time favorite.
Aladdin.
I'm pretty sure that the merger is kind of ruined Disney World for me, and I'm not sure I'm getting it back.
Yeah,
I feel icky.
The problem is,
Like, I know we're getting really off topic here, but I know Disney World just added like Pandora, like from Avatar. I'm like, what does that have to do with what? Who was clamoring for Avatar Land?
That doesn't have anything to do with anything, guys. Yeah, that's not helpful. Oh my gosh.
That movie just disappear off the face of the earth after it made $1 billion. And that's
the funny thing too is like that movie. It's like literally the highest grossing movie of all time. It's completely disappeared from the social consciousness. Like no one cares except for James Cameron. Like really,
yeah.
Like,
and it was because part of it was because it was the way it was filmed and stuff.
3D,
it was new and interesting, and people wanted to see it for that. They weren't insanely going for the story.
The amount that James Cameron cares is just holding up the entire Avatar's franchise. He cares so much that it's actually keeping Avatar afloat. He just calls Disney once a week
it just makes him look like.
Remember Avatar?
See, it just makes him look like Elfman, though, and everybody else who was that same thing. Remember this thing I did? Remember this thing I did? It's me. It's all about me. It's me, you know. And it's like,
that self-obsession is like that's the thing. Is it's kind of like one of the things you have to have in order to get into that position.
You do, and Joss proved that he had it just the other day. So that's the other elephant in the room where Buttface decided to take credit for putting Everybody Knows in the film.
He didn't.
I'm
sure he didn't.
He said that he did. Well, here's the problem, guys. Even after the first couple times I watched it, I actually pondered whether or not that was Zach's choice, because Zach's films tend to be these ones. He's working on a mythology concept, and if you look carefully, the politics reflect our world and other things like that, but he doesn't put in popular media of the time, because that would date it, and it makes it less universal and less long-standing. And he's working on this as a mythology project, and so
I mean,
just hear me out.
Popular media of the time.
Here's the thing, though. Well, but see that song, like, I'm not saying the footage is his. We all know it. Yeah. The most of the sequence is most likely his, you know, and I would bet absolute money on that. What I want to bet is that there was a Junkie soundtrack piece that went with that. Yeah. I'll bet you. I will bet you less money than I would about it being Zach's footage, but I would bet you that it's entirely possible Joss picked that song, which kills me because it is about infidelity, and wow, Joss, you're just really blind to your own flaws.
Wow.
And put it in there because because it spoke to him and this, that, and the other, because the footage spoke to him, and he had already kicked out Junkie and just wanted to put that there, and now is ever so proud of himself because everybody loved it. But the bottom line is, yes, the song fit the footage and it worked, but the footage is what mattered the most. And if you look at Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, they didn't have a regular song, so to speak, put into the film's soundtrack.
Here's the thing, though.
Oh, wait, I take that back. There was one of those in Man of Steel. My bad. I'm sorry.
Here's the thing, though, is that
I don't know. I can't decide.
There was early talk about actually working around a Leonard Cohen song.
But wasn't that Elfman that said it?
but the thing is that, like, if that is in place before Elfman was ever brought on, then, like, what are the like, honestly, I just don't buy his shit. And honestly, the way that he phrased it made me feel like he was taking credit for something that was just bullshit. Like, that's the thing.
It's entirely possible.
That's the thing, is that what he said is he's like, that I stuck that in Justice League.
Yeah, and I was
but that doesn't necessarily mean that he chose it for Justice League. It just means that he fucking put it in there, and that doesn't mean anything. Like,
it's true. Or he put it in there and then called and said, okay, so everywhere else except for here, you got to work around it. The one we do know that was Junkie XL was Come Together, and of course they just slapped it on the end credits because it wasn't good enough to be in the film, and. Total crap. But, you know, so you're right. You bring up some good points, and now I just don't know. But what I do know is that it's entirely possible that there was supposed to be an actual musical score for the soundtrack score that was supposed to go behind that. I don't really know, but I do know that
it would be an
giant turd, and he's always got to come in and be like, aren't I awesome? And I will say, I kind of giggled how everybody freaked out at him for even daring, and I was like, slightly gratified.
I mean, the thing, though, is that, like, that would be such
you did one good thing. What about all the other crap? And I was like, okay, thank you. So, I don't know.
I just think that would be such an unconventional choice for opening credits as well, which, like, isn't out of the park as far as Zach goes, because he makes a lot of unconventional decisions. But, like, you know, I mean, like, everybody just sort of said, like, it looks a lot like The Watchmen, and The Watchmen, you know,
used the Leonard Cohen song.
It's kind of dated like that, and I think that I don't know. I don't trust Joss, and I think that he's literally doing something really slimy in that moment, and it really, like, it ruined my whole day. It ruined my entire day.
My friend was like, but Joss said that he would stay true to Zach's vision, and I'm like, well, he didn't. And, you know, honestly,
Joss has said a lot of things over the years
and switch it all around and just crap on the vision that was there before, that makes him a slimy person in my book. He jumped at the shot, he jumped at the chance to come in here and do this because it would get him money, and he was pretty sure it would be successful and he'd get some awesome notoriety. But, you know, in the end, you're right, he was slimy all the way around. Everything about him in this was slimy as slimy could be. So I agree with you there. And now that I think about it, I'm like, okay, wait, there was more in there. There just really wasn't a whole lot in Batman v Superman, but that doesn't mean it wasn't supposed to be here. And so he very well could be just taking the credit for allowing it to stay after it was originally, you know. So, okay, thank you. I feel but you're right, it ruined my day too, and I was like, shut up, you piece of crap.
It ruined my whole day. I was so fucking demoralized.
He's such a smarmy, nasty piece of crap. I kind of just want to beat him, and I'm starting to hate him worse and worse and worse. He's going to be my mortal enemy by the time this is all over with, and my family already knows you just don't speak his name in this house, because you will get some kind of screaming, you know, hissy fit about him about how much I hate him.
Honestly, if anyone would like to be inducted into that club, I have been the president for many years now. I'm very happy to stamp new cards.
I'll be your secretary. Let's have shirts.
We have all sorts of open positions. So anybody wants to join up in the Joss Whedon Hate Club,
sign me up, baby. So,
I'm a very prestigious member.
I don't like to hate on things, but he makes me very angry, and his whole behavior in this makes me very angry. And it's like, no, buddy, you don't come off of this scot-free. You know, everybody wants to blame WB, and they rightfully share a huge amount of this responsibility. But, like, I'm sorry, it just speaks of insanely lack of integrity to be okay to come in and do this. You know what I mean? Like, he jumped at this chance. He was good with it when they said do more, you know, and then the way some article was like, he had to make a choice between following Zach's vision or doing it his way. No, I'm pretty sure the studio said do it your way. But he didn't say, you know what? This feels weird and I don't like it, and I'm going to go ahead and bow out and you better give this to somebody else. No, he went with it. He ran with it. And that kind of earns some everlasting hatred on my part. And then just watching him mangle the things that should have been beautiful gets a little bit more. And then slapping on the boob shot and everything is just, it was too much. So, yeah, I'm an official member.
I feel like
and I've been
after all of this, I feel like I still have to mention that I do enjoy the movie. I did enjoy the movie, and it was a great time. But it wasn't what I came in for. I feel like I need to clarify that. I don't think I've mentioned that in the podcast.
It's not what anybody came in for.
I've only said that, like, privately on a on the chat. Like, I did enjoy the movie; it was great. But would I ever, if they were still carrying on with this view, with this vision, would I ever really want to go to the midnight viewings? Would I book a ticket per se? No, not really, because it's not what I originally signed up for. When you said, when you initially asked me what does the DCEU mean to you and how deep it is, it's kind of lost that essence.
Yep.
But the movie in and of itself, as a movie, it felt more like a Marvel movie, which isn't my cup of tea, but it is a great movie. I enjoyed it. The characters were great. They were done decently.
Yeah. There were good points to it. It's been ruined for me, so now that it's been tainted,
because of the high hopes.
I won't stop other people from doing it, but I can't, Anyway, sorry, I've been summoned. I have to go, so
okay.
I'm like an hour over time.
Yeah. So I think with that being said,
nice speaking to
you. Go ahead and wrap up our thoughts here. We definitely ran longer than I thought we would. I think a lot of that just comes from our.
Sorry,
hate,
I came
our
in
hate
halfway.
towards Joss. Oh no, you're fine. I think a lot of that came from our hate towards Joss. So a big old F you to you, buddy.
I still don't know how I feel about him, and I don't know whether he's been given a bad hand in Marvel, and because apparently Firefly was really good to a degree, and so was Buffy. But I feel like maybe Marvel had a lot of control, and then with DC he just had to do what they wanted to do and copy what Marvel were doing. I don't know. I dislike what he's done to the Zack Snyder cut and the Zack Snyder.
If you want to talk about dirt, Buffy and Firefly dirt, I got it.
I suppose, but I dislike what he did, and I don't appreciate what he did to the movie and how he did it. And I wish in the reshoots that he did do, he tried as much as possible to remain true to the source material that he was getting his shoots from. However, he didn't do that, so I am disappointed with what he has done. I don't really trust him with any other movies. That's how I feel about Joss Whedon and the universe in and of itself. I feel like we shouldn't give up on it just yet. There's still hope. There's still Aquaman. I don't feel comfortable giving up on Jason, just purely because he's so much into it and he's been so happy. And when he got cast into the role, he was just absolutely ecstatic. And for the universe to be just, given up on would just be a shame. Because now with the Marvel universe, you've got what did they say they want to do? 20 more Marvel movies after Infinity?
Oh, yeah.
And then now that they're merging with Fox, and that will happen, add the X-Men and Deadpool and what else Fox owns. Don't they own the Aquaman version of Marvel and a few other characters?
Oh god.
Oh yeah, the Submariner.
I don't want to give up on the DCEU because I don't want to be just given Marvel for the rest of my life. I want to have DCEU.
Yeah, the same way.
But I feel like as fans, we should cherish and treasure what we have from Zack and be grateful for the work and the time and the years of his life that he's put into this movie and into these movies, and then just take the rest with a grain of salt. Might not be the greatness that we wanted, but I don't want to hate these characters because I love them so dearly and they have such a special place in my heart, a special place in my
I think that variety is really, really important. And I think that that's something that Warner Brothers can continue to bring no matter what they do. And if they keep bringing variety, I'll keep showing up. I just won't keep showing up with the same fervor.
Yeah, and I wouldn't go to midnight viewings. I wouldn't particularly watch them more than twice, 3 times. If it was a really good movie, I'd give it 3 viewings. Justice League, I do want to go for a 3rd time. Just don't know when it'll happen. Hopefully I'll realise before it's out of the cinemas. But I feel like now that I've had my extreme reaction of hatred toward the movie, and then I initially had my reaction of enjoying it. I remember me and Nick had that, whether it was the first time or second time watching it. I'm trying to get to a balanced view, so I'm not always going up or down and being far too attached or far too, I don't want to hate it either. So I'm just trying to find a way to work around it because the DC universe means a lot to me. So I'm just trying to, basically that. So that's what the DC universe means to me. And I can't ever say what should have been done or what could have been done, because I'm not a film writer or director or producer. I don't know how it works. I don't know how things work in that world, because just like they don't know how things work in a laboratory or processing bloods or whatever it is that I do. Not whatever, I do know what I do. I'm just like wrapping it up. But I know what I like, but I don't know what I do to change it. So I feel like if I'm going to criticize it, I want to give it in a way that I don't sound like an entitled fan, because you don't want to do that, because I don't know. It's really tricky. With art is subjective in general, so it's just you enjoy what you have, and it doesn't mean that you have to stop enjoying what you've had before. Sorry, we were supposed to wrap this up. I will stop speaking.
You're fine. You're fine.
Well. Thank you so much, guys.
No, thank you. I'm glad we're all able to come in.
I hope that makes sense.
And that was really, really well said. I just want to say thank you again. All of us want to say what came from what Danielle said on Tumblr yesterday. If you guys have a chance to go on her blog and see it, I highly recommend it. She said something like really nice and sweet. So yeah, thank you guys for everything you said today. Hopefully we reached a couple of you guys out there, or some of you guys. Just you know, your opinions are validated. Just because that Warner Brothers did something really shitty with Justice League doesn't mean that the way that Man of Steel or Batman v Superman or Wonder Woman Attack of You isn't validated. That you matter as a fan, and that you matter to us as a fan base. Like, we're all in this together. And I couldn't be happier to be with so many of you amazing people.
I wish. Thank you so much, Nick, for giving us this this outlet, or this podcast, because it's been great. I'm enjoying it. And thank you guys for listening to us weekly or bi-weekly.
Seriously, thank you.
Fortnightly.
I know you guys have been hearing a lot of us lately between Just League spoiler, the Man of Steel commentary, and all that stuff. But thank you guys for listening as always. So before we head out, if Danielle and Fatma, if you guys want to tell everyone where they can find you online.
Hi, I'm Fatma, and I'm Stay Awesome Gotham from Tumblr.
I'm Danielle, and I'm a Social Justice League on Tumblr.
And of course, you guys can find me on here at Nerdy Nick on YouTube, True Man of Steel on Twitter and Tumblr. Definitely keep an eye out for all of our stuff moving forward. These discussions again ain't ending anytime soon. All of our frustrations with WB, those ain't going anywhere anytime soon. But again, thank you guys for listening, and thank you to the fans. You guys are really why we did this podcast, or why we do this podcast in the first place. The DCEU fandom is amazing and awesome, and we just want to let you guys know that. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good one.